Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Board meeting. We call the meeting to order, and first order of business, Mr. Perrier, I'd like you to sit for Ms. Wolf, who's ill this evening. That's okay.
It's okay with me.
And first two items are to approve the minutes of March 20th and March 27th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have a series of public hearings, and just so everybody in the room is aware, procedure is there will be presentation by the proponent, questions by the planning board, public comment, up to 3 rounds of comment. You provide your name and address. You must speak in the first round if you wish to speak in the second or the third round. Same thing if you wish to speak in the third round, you must have spoken in the second round. The first round is a maximum of 3 minutes, which is just oral discussion. Second round is a maximum of 5 minutes, and you can give a presentation during that if you wish. And the third round is a maximum of 5 additional minutes, oral presentation only. So if you have graphics, you're going to want to bring those up into the second round if you choose to speak during the public hearing. Following that, the public hearing will be closed, and the board will deliberate. First item on the agenda is request of 96 State Street LLC as owner for property at 96 State Street, requesting a parking conditional use permit from section 10.1112.14 to allow 0 parking spaces where 30 are required. Property is on Assessor's Map 107, Lot 52, in Liesman Character District 4, or CD4, and the Historic District. Who is here to present this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Darcy Pizer on behalf of the applicant, 96 State LLC. As the chairman notes, the applicant, 96 State LLC, is the owner of 96 State Street. They are seeking a conditional use permit under section 10.1112.14 of the ordinance to provide less than the minimum number of off-street parking spaces as required by section 10.1112.30. 96 State LLC was before the planning board last month and presented an application for a CUP for a small addition to be constructed on the second and third floors of a portion of the building. But after comments from the planning board and an abutter, 96 State is no longer seeking to construct an addition. All the renovations that we're speaking about tonight will be in the interior of the property. There will be no exterior changes and no change to the footprint of the building. The only relief that is needed tonight is a conditional use permit to allow for less parking spaces than the minimum required under the ordinance to facilitate that change in use from restaurant to residential use for the second floor. This represents a change to a less intensive use under the ordinance, requiring less parking spaces and reducing overall parking demand on the property. The board is familiar with this application and with the standards for granting a CUP to allow for less parking than the minimum required under section 1112.30. So I'll just go briefly over the criteria and answer any questions that the board has. According to section 1112.14 of the zoning ordinance, the planning board may grant a CUP to allow for less parking than the required minimum if, number 1, the applicant submits a parking demand analysis showing that the proposed number of off-street spaces is sufficient for the proposed use. Number 2, if they identify permanent evidence-based measures to reduce demand. And number 3, if the board finds that the number of off-street spaces will be adequate and appropriate for the proposed use of the property. The parking demand analysis prepared by Altus Engineering has calculated the required number of spaces for the property at 46 spaces based on the existing uses. Those existing uses are restaurant use on the first floor and second floor, and with an allocated square footage of 4,365 square feet gross floor area. And rounded up, that brings the requirement to 44 required off-street parking spaces. The use of the third floor, which is residential, has 1,740 square feet, and it's a single dwelling unit over 750 square feet, which requires 1.3 parking spaces, rounded up to 2, so for 46 total. By converting the second floor to residential use, the parking space requirement is reduced to 30 spaces, and that's due to the reduction in square footage of the restaurant space by losing that second floor restaurant use. The parking space requirement for the first floor restaurant use at 2,625 square feet, plus the 2 dwelling units on the second and third floor, would bring the total parking space requirement for the proposed use down to 30 spaces. I'll point out that the property does not lay in, but is very close to the downtown overlay district. In the downtown overlay district, there would be no parking requirement for this property, as the non-residential use requirement would be 0 spaces, and the four space credit for the residential use would take care of the 3 spaces that we need here for the residential use. But as this is just outside of the downtown overlay district, we are requesting a permit for 0 spaces where 30 are required. The evidence-based measures to reduce demand are a few. First, the proposed use itself will reduce demand. Under the ordinance, the residential use is a less intense one than restaurant use, requiring less designated off-street spaces because it generates less demand. The demand analysis that we submitted shows that under the ITE parking standards, the demand calculation at peak times is reduced from 82 vehicles demanding spaces to 51. This brings the proposed use into greater conformity with the ordinance. Second, as the application notes, there is access to nearby overnight parking. There is parallel parking along State Street and around that area. There is parking in the garages and the nearby free lots. And the property is situated along the bus route, which could reduce the need for both employees of the restaurant or the owners who will reside upstairs to park downtown. Finally, the number of off-street spaces allowed by the requested permit is adequate and appropriate for the proposed use of the property. The property currently has 0 designated off-street spaces and doesn't have the ability to add any. The currently available parking is what the more intense restaurant use presently relies on without any issue or unmet need, or no more so than any other similarly situated downtown property. Given the conversion to a less demanding use as it relates to parking, the requested parking for the proposed residential use is adequate and appropriate. So for those reasons, we request that the board grant a conditional use permit to allow for 0 off-street spaces where the minimum required under the ordinance for the proposed use is 30 and where 0 presently exist.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
Thank you for your presentation. With the changes that are being made from the previous application, is there now a reduction in the amount of residents are going to be able to stay in this unit, these units?
Yes, the drawings that were submitted last showed a 5-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, which is now a 4 and will remain a 4-bedroom unit. And I believe the 3rd floor, or the 2nd floor residence was going to be 2 bedrooms and remains 2 bedrooms. I believe the extra space for the 2nd floor was going to be just that flex living area, which is no longer included in the plans.
Okay, thank you.
By receiving this CUP here tonight, is this the applicant saying that they will not be pursuing any additional renovations or changes to the building structure in the future?
We're not seeking to make that a condition of this application. There is no present intention to do that, but we're not seeking to make it a condition of this approval, nor are we required to, I believe, under the ordinance.
No, by no means. Just curious because of the change in plans. It's a prompted thought.
Correct. No, there are no plans at this time to do an addition in the future. I believe my reading of section 10.240 is that this use could not be expanded in the future without another CUP.
That's correct.
Any other questions? So just so it's clear, the outside of the building will not change, no expansion, existing footprint, and that's how you address the concerns that came up last month, so that there's...
Correct.
Existing conditions basically will remain with respect to the adjacent property.
Correct. There will be no exterior changes, no changes to the facade, no changes to the footprint. I believe concerns were also raised about code questions, and that had to do with as it related to the addition towards the abutting building, and those concerns have been removed. So I believe all of the questions have been addressed at this time.
Okay. No other questions of the board? I'm going to open the public hearing then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody here or on Zoom who wishes to speak to, for, or against this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Chris Mulligan. I'm an attorney at Hopeful Phoenix. I'm here on behalf of Karen Bouffard, who owns the adjacent property at 100 State Street. Tim Phoenix was before you representing Ms. Bouffard last month, but he couldn't be here this evening. He asked me to fill in. I think you're all aware that the building next door is quite unique and an award-winning building that requires a high level of scrutiny when changes to the neighborhood are about to happen. And I think that was articulated by members of the board last month. What we would like to see is, if the board is going to go forward and grant a conditional use permit for parking based on the representations that were made, that conditions be placed on it, including a condition that the addition that was originally presented in the application not be built for a period of time. I would suggest 5 years. We would also like to see a limit on the occupancy that would be limited to 2 residents per bedroom, given that the representation has been that either the owner of the building is going to occupy one of the apartments, or restaurant workers will be living in the apartment. Given the sensitive area downtown with the lack of easily available parking, we believe those are reasonable conditions. Also, given the fact that my client's property is very unique and is quite sensitive, in the event that there is going to be construction in the future, we would ask that there be a full construction management and mitigation plan process put in place for 96 State Street, so that the historic structure next door, which is extremely close to the subject property, is properly protected. Beyond that, I think there are some questions and some questionable assertions in the parking demand analysis that you received. In the first instance, the analysis that you received relies entirely on the work product of the architect. The engineer that signed the parking demand analysis took the information directly from Winter Holben's review of the property. So I think it's suspect that the engineer that prepared the analysis didn't actually review the property himself. Furthermore, one of the uses in the plans appears to have changed. Sheet A110 in your plans, all the previous plans showed a basement area that was a kitchen prep area. That has now, in the most recent version of the plans that were submitted, been converted to a kitchen storage area, which changes the amount of parking that would be required to be allocated to that area. So this is just an example of why we think this project requires additional scrutiny. Finally, in order to obtain a conditional use permit for parking, one of the requirements is that the applicant provide permanent evidence-based measures to reduce the parking demand. We haven't seen any of that, in my opinion. What we have are a number of speculative statements that the demand will go down based on the change of the use, but there is nothing evidence-based, or there are no evidence-based measures that address establishing that demand will go down. So I think the parking demand analysis is not sufficient to grant the CUP on that basis. But again, if the board is going to consider granting a conditional use permit for parking, we believe there are appropriate conditions, including making conditions of approval based on the representations that have been made by the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Anybody on Zoom?
I'll make a couple of responses to the comments that were raised if there's no other comments from any other members of the
You can
public.
come up right now in any case. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'll speak first to the conditions that Attorney Mulligan is seeking to tie to the approval. Again, as I stated, we're not seeking to tie this approval to conditions about who is living there, nor do we need it to. The conditions of approval have to be reasonably related to the standards and criteria for the approval set forth in the ordinance. Those are specific in this instance for a parking CUP, and they're based on square footage of the space and the use. To tie the approval to a condition unrelated to the specific criteria, such as who is living there and how many tenants can be in a building when the calculation is made based off of square footage of a dwelling unit, I think is irrelevant to that criteria, and that would go beyond what is required by the ordinance. Essentially rewriting the standard, which is not the purpose of this conditional use permit application here tonight. As I said before, the use can't be expanded any further without an additional conditional use permit. As far as the concerns about how many people are living in the building, there's no use here that's presented that's going to be against code violations of the city. That's not the intention of the applicant and the owner. She intends to reside there and to let her employees live there as she's able to. Any abutters who have concerns about how many people are living there are always welcome to call the city, call the fire department, or make a code violation complaint about that. As far as the demand analysis relying on the calculations of the architect, there is no criteria in the ordinance that requires that the engineer has to specifically visit the site. They are entitled to rely on the architect's calculations based on building square footage. Those are done, I think it's common practice to calculate those via the CAD drawings, which we submitted, and those were available for review. So I don't think that that presents a problem or poses any specific deficiency in the demand analysis that we submitted. And then as far as those drawings regarding the change from the kitchen prep area to the kitchen storage area, I think that was a clarification made by the owner. Based on the use of that space, it's used as, I believe, storage for kitchen equipment, tools and things like that, and serving equipment, and that was done at the clarification of the owner and approved by the architect based on the plans that we submitted. And then just lastly, I'll speak to those permanent evidence-based measures. There was a very similar application for 111 State Street 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, where they received almost identical relief. And as far as their permanent evidence-based measures to reduce parking demand, they relied on essentially the same criteria and, in fact, relied on their own parking demand analysis and the reduction to a less intensive use to classify that as a permanent evidence-based measure, which that application was approved without any objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other first-round speakers? Anybody to, for, or against this application? Any second-round speakers? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing unless somebody raises their hand on Zoom or here. We'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, sorry, if I may.
May
Wonder if I wonder if this is appropriate for suspension of the rules. There was an assertion that this work product that was stamped by a licensed engineer might not be the work product of that engineer, which is a serious violation in PE law in the state of New Hampshire. I happen to notice the engineers in the room, I wondered if he would like to address it or not at his wish, if we allow suspension of the rules.
You can propose that.
That's my motion, that we suspend
Okay.
the rules and allow the engineer. Thank you.
We have motion and a second. Any discussion? I'm less concerned about it than you are, but I see he's prepared and ready to speak.
Yes.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
For the record, Eric Weinrub with Altus. Can I actually see the document to make sure it is the same document I prepared?
I can share it.
We can put it up on the screen.
Just don't touch the screen.
Document dated April 4th. This is the document I prepared. And just for clarification, we did rely on Design Professional, the architect, to provide us with the areas of the building. And it just is common sense. You're going from a restaurant to a residence, there's a reduction in parking.
That wasn't the question, but thank you for the additional comment.
You have additional comments, questions?
I think you're asserting you stamped and you did this work as a professional engineer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, board deliberation, discussion.
You want a motion first?
Well, we can talk about it a little bit, or we can, if you want to make a motion, we can do that too. Staff has made a couple of recommendations.
Just looking for the language. I moved.
I'll make a motion. We vote to find the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1112.14 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Second.
And do those findings include the fact that there's no external change to the building?
They do.
Yes.
Just want it clear. Any discussion? This is on the findings. Yes, Paul.
And any future alterations or additions to the property would have to go before Historic District Commission and this board, and TAC committee,
Not necessarily.
Not
not
necessarily
not necessarily TAC, but HDC and Planning Board, correct?
for conditional use permit.
An expansion.
And any
Expansion.
alterations or additions to the property.
Internal changes wouldn't necessarily.
Right, internal wouldn't.
Expansion of the
Additions
use.
would,
Right, expansion of the use that would require more parking at this time would require them to come back.
because some of the
And
things
then
that were,
exterior changes would
some
require.
of the things that were being
HDC.
requested were conditioning, for a period of time that there'd be no changes, but any of the changes that a butter would be concerned about would have to come before Historic District Commission, correct? And us.
As represented, there's no change. If they proposed a change next week, they'd have to come back. If they came back with the plan they had last month, they'd have to come back.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Is that you? Do you
Yep,
agree, Peter?
that's what- yep.
Yes, Joe.
That begs the question, does this motion, in fact, if it passes,
This is findings of fact.
okay, very good. I can hold my question, I can just ask the question now because it's all part of the same application.
Sure.
Are we nullifying the HCC approval that exists right now, and which lasts for a year? Is there anything in our motions tonight that nullify that approval, which would not require the applicant to go before the HCC again?
This plan doesn't conform with the HDC plan, so we can't nullify it, but we haven't approved it.
So is there anything that prevents the applicant tomorrow? They have an approved HEC application.
Then they would have to come back before this board.
For a CUP, correct?
No, they'd have their CUP at that point.
Not for the plan that coincides with the HTC approved plans,
Right.
I believe.
What would trigger this to come back before this board?
Expansion of a use.
Okay.
like
Which is
if the
what,
construction
that's
starts
what
in the
was
whole-
here last month, was an expansion.
Any expansion of use.
The building's getting bigger.
Thank you.
So we do the, is everybody okay with the findings? The findings are as represented. We've got the information that's been presented. Just look in the, if it's a substantive question, that's the next part. So,
No, it's to the findings.
okay.
So my understanding is that there will be a reduction, that the whole premise that we're working on is that there will be a reduction in the restaurant sales activity, which will result in fewer parking requirements. And that reduction in the volume of activity will come about because they're no longer using the upper floors for restaurant activity.
The study done by the engineer based on ITE database shows a lesser demand based on the proposed change, yes.
Lesser demand for parking on the base assumption that there's less restaurant sales.
Correct.
And so that we're accepting that as an underlying assumption.
We're showing, it's
Sales
the entire plan set. The plan, as represented by the attorney representing the applicant, as shown on the plans, and as studied in the engineering analysis that was provided, which is required, those all reflect a reduction in restaurant space and change to residential.
But implicitly, sales volume as well, because it's the sales volume that drives the traffic.
We're square footage.
Square footage.
We're square footage in our ordinance, so a really successful restaurant of a certain size might generate more demand than a larger one with, wasn't as good. But that's not how our ordinance works. It's a logical, you're thinking correctly, but it just doesn't track with the ordinance.
I understand.
So findings of fact, we have a motion second. Any other discussion on the findings? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Findings are adopted.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we vote to grant the conditional use permit as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Yes.
Because our conditional use permit is about the parking, I don't think that we really have in my opinion, the purview regarding putting any sort of time limit on an expansion since they have to come back. Or I don't even know if we have the purview to request a construction mitigation plan. But I was going to ask Peter that part.
Right, I mean, certainly for the work they're proposed, it's all interior.
So we wouldn't need one.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm all that.
I'm not aware of how we could impose a condition that basically would be saying you have to conform to the ordinance. So,
Right.
any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 361 Hanover Steam Factory LLC is owner for property at 361 Hanover Street, requesting design review for the construction of new residential buildings along Hanover Street and renovation of the existing building with associated site improvements. Said property is located on Assessor's Map 138, Lot 63, and lies in the Character District 5 or CD5, the Downtown Overlay District, and the North End Incentive Overlay District, North End NEIOD. And I notice Mr. Simonis is sitting out of this application, as is Councilor Moreau. But we still have a quorum. Who is here to present this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Attorney John Boson. I represent the applicant. With me tonight is Shane Forsley from Hampshire Development and John Shagden from Haley Ward. We're here tonight for design review under the Site Plan Regulations 2.4.3 and RSA 676:4, Roman numeral 2, parenthesis B, for residential project in the CD5 Character District. As you know, we were before this board last year on May 16th. We received design review for a mixed-use project. But you may recall, based on feedback from this board, from city staff, and from many abutters, we redesigned the project to soften it for the neighborhood. We broke up the buildings and we improved the design. And on July 18th of last summer, we brought that plan before you for a preliminary conceptual consultation, which was very well received by this board. But to build that alternate design, we needed some variances. So, and those variances were to remove the first floor commercial use, which is required in the downtown overlay district. We got those variances on February 18th. So the plan before you is the plan that we've been working hard on for over the past year. It's a plan we're committed to build on this site, and which will contain somewhere between 40 to 48 units and will require all parking that's required under the ordinance. And I give that estimate of unit count is because the sizes and the number of units are still in play, but the actual size of the buildings are not. Purpose tonight, though, is simply whether or not we meet the standards of the requirements for design review. If you grant the design review tonight, we plan to submit immediately for the Technical Advisory Committee, where the details will be ironed out, which include many, if not most of all, the concerns raised by the abutters. I just want to make it clear to this board that we already have a vested design review for the mixed-use plan. But if this plan is approved tonight for design review, it's our intention to replace that plan, the prior plan, with the improved plan that's before you tonight. As you know from our prior hearings, this project is subject to some very complicated zoning because we're in CD5, downtown overlay district, and partially within the North End incentive district. Under the provisions, those sections of the ordinance, we could be proposing a much more intense project, but we're still prepared to move forward with what is approved, if approved tonight. We believe it's greatly improved. The design is fully compliant with the Portsmouth zoning ordinance in all respects, including density and parking. Site plan regulations contained in section 2.4.3 contain some very specific criteria that is required for design review. We met that criteria when we were before you last May. John Shagden is going to come up and walk through that criteria this evening to show how we meet that criteria. But before I do, I just want to say that we are aware of the public comment that's been submitted for this project. We do believe that all of that comment can be thoroughly addressed at TAC. We can't control the opposition against the project, but we can control and we can address the technical aspects of the plan to show how we meet not only the site review criteria, but the criteria of the Portsmouth zoning ordinance. So with that background, I'd like to invite John Shagden to the podium. He'll walk you through the criteria, the site review regulations, then either of us can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. John Shagden from Haley Ward, here to present the technical aspects of this design review submission. Just for the record, also here tonight is Terrence Parker, the landscape architect, and Scott Brown, project architect, to answer any questions you might have in those areas. We believe this submission is complete. It meets the requirements for you to conclude that the design review process is complete, and so vote. Since the last time we were here, a year ago, the developer agreed to look at getting a zoning ordinance relief to eliminate the required first floor commercial uses. Also, there was a lot of discussion and variances were granted for apartment row house and duplex building types, and a ground floor height of 10.5 feet or 12 is required. The zoning board took many months of deliberation and much attention was paid to those issues before they granted the variance. It took a lot of time, but the project benefited by that time. So I want to emphasize on behalf of 361 Hanover Steam Factory LLC, we're here taking the next step in the process, showing you the significant positive changes to the proposed development and requesting that you conclude that the design review process at this time is complete. We believe we have submitted all the necessary information in sufficient detail to allow you to make that determination, I'd like to run through first the site plan review requirements, specifically Site Plan Review Regulations, Section 243, Design Review. I want to review what's required, how we meet those requirements with the submitted items you have before you. Under the Site Review Regulations, the request for design review shall include information from Section 2531 and 2543 of the Site Plan Review Regulations. The information should be submitted in detail to enable the board to understand the proposed project and identify potential issues and concerns that would need to be addressed before we would go through the technical review committee process. In that process, the design elements are finalized and then brought back to the board. I will go through the requirements of 2531, discuss the information that has been submitted, beginning with Section 2531A. Requirements call for a checklist of items. The application materials include a detailed statement that lists the green building components and systems to be utilized on the project. Plans include floor area and dimensions of the buildings and statements of uses. And the plans show tax map and lot numbers, parcel zoning, owner's name and address, name of adjacent property owners and holders of easements, listing of professionals involved with the plans, listing of the reference plans, and a full boundary survey is included. Section 2543 requires the plans to display additional information. Beginning with 2543A, the requirements include an existing conditions plan, building and structures with elevations and plan views, indications of access and circulation, parking and loading, water and sewer infrastructure, other utilities, solid waste, stormwater management, outdoor lighting, landscaping, grading, contours, open space. And since the project is in a character district, other special requirements and standards. It's to note that the project is not in a special flood hazard area. Turning to the site plan set, I'd like to just start with the cover sheet and go through what was presented along with the plans on the screen, what was presented in the written narrative statement for the project submission. The project is the repurposing of the existing structure known as the Heinemann Building, which has an outbuilding known as the Last Chance Garage. Next slide. The property will be subdivided into two separate lots, one lot for each building. The site plan proposal is to redevelop the larger lot into entirely residential use, and it has been chosen to be 40 units. That's going to be fixed going forward. By additions to the existing building and 4 new buildings shown on the submitted site plans. The subdivision plan details the proposed property division. And I want to point out to you and note clearly for the record an area that will provide and continue to provide access for the adjacent property known as the Hanover Place condominium. And that is shown with a note here and a dashed line showing the location of that access that is going to continue after the project. So the condominium association will have continued access across the redeveloped lot number 2. The next sheet in the set is an orthophoto plan for reference, followed by the existing conditions plan showing all the detailed infrastructure, the development, existing landscaping, and existing sidewalk network. The next slide shows general demolition, which includes removing all the existing parking lot pavement and a small addition on the north side of the Heinemann Building, as well as some existing trees. It also shows the front Hanover Street sidewalk demolition because that is going to be replaced. The next sheet of the set is the site plan. This plan contains a development standards table in the upper left-hand corner listing how the development meets the zoning requirements. Below that is an impervious surface chart showing that the site will result in a reduction of impervious surface, and also calculations showing proposed Lot 1, the Last Chance Garage, will meet the open space requirements of the zoning ordinance. The application cover letter details the proposed uses and the associated parking under the Portsmouth zoning ordinance. So turning to that, there are 2 units that will be between 500 and 750 square feet, requiring 2 spaces. 38 units are over 750 square feet, requiring 50 spaces. 1 visitor space is required for every 5 units. With 40 total units, 8 visitor spaces are required. There is a small allowable deduction, since the project is in the downtown overlay district, of 4 spaces, which brings the total required parking to 56 spaces. The total provided parking is 72 spaces. The letter talks about the visitor parking requirements. We believe that the 2 exterior visitor spaces, and there are 2 visitor spaces in Building A, and we believe that the rest of the, there is adequate other spaces in the neighborhood for visitors, as visitors are going to visit everyone else in the neighborhood also. And as required, there are stacked parking spaces, 12 in Building A and 6 in Building D, and those will be assigned to specific units within those buildings. The interior parking space layout is detailed in the architectural plans. It has been noted by a butter comment that some of the proposed landscape areas on the site do not count as open space as defined under the ordinance, as the ordinance defines open space or landscaped areas less than 5 feet wide are not able to be included in the calculation of open space. So the project decreases the impervious surfaces to a 5% standard. But I can state that, as you know, under the open space definitions, sidewalks are allowed as open space as long as the sidewalk area is not more than 50% of a given open space area. To put it another way, in areas where there is more landscaping than sidewalk, you can count the entire area as open space under the definition. We have done detailed calculations, and this layout contains sidewalk/landscape areas where the sidewalk does not exceed 50% of the total open space area, so the plan will meet the open space requirement easily. Next slide shows, and you're there, that slide shows the professionally landscaped design, if you go back one, included in the development plan package. I will note that there is landscaping proposed for an area off the property on the left side as you look at this, adjacent to the Rock Street right-of-way. Those particular plantings have been assessed by the Portsmouth Trees and Greenery Committee, and they have given full approval as those are appropriate for this location. In addition, it's been suggested that the area of this area of the development file for a Portsmouth Adopt a Stock program, and that's something that the developer is agreeable to doing and appropriate, given to the need to maintain on-site landscaping allows the maintenance of that landscaping between the site and Rock Street to be easily added in. Also, that planting does provide additional screening for the residential property on the other side of Rock Street. This landscape plan also shows the required bike racks. There will be additional bike racks inside the buildings. Another aspect of your review, circulation, traffic generation, and trip assignment have all been submitted with the package in the traffic memorandum for Vanessa and Associates. The traffic memorandum will receive a full vetting in the site plan approval process at the Technical Advisory Committee. Continuing beyond the landscape plans, utility plans are next. These plans show the servicing of the units from existing utilities, as well as electrical looping utilities to provide redundancy, and we would submit that meets the intent of the submission, subject, of course, to review by the Technical Advisory Committee. Turning to stormwater management, in the next plan shows that proposed roof runoff will be collected and treated in gutter filters, routed to on-site catch basins, and moved to underground appropriate receiving facilities. The next sheet shows site lighting, which consists of building-mounted lights, and the specifications for the lights are included in your submission package. The next two sheets show vehicle and fire truck turning movement diagrams, and the set is rounded out with the building plans and elevation and detail sheets, which I won't go through at this time. If you want to scroll through them to highlight, that's fine. To highlight a few issues relating to comments that will be coming your way, you're aware it's going to be more appropriate to collect trash inside all the buildings and provide private pickup services, which will be the intention of the proposal going forward. It's also interesting to note that the existing sidewalk is being expanded in width along Hanover Street, and that expansion is coming onto the property of the applicant and will need an easement. But that is acceptable. That will allow also for full sidewalk plow widths. And to reiterate the point, the developer understands the deeded requirement to continue to provide access to the Hill Hanover Condominium Association. We show that on the subdivision plan. I think the design team has done a lot of work, listened a lot over the past year, and this is a superior plan to the one that was presented in 2024. Working together with utility companies and the Department of Public Works, the plan will continue to evolve in a way that will serve the development and not impact but improve utilities and drainage in the neighborhood. This concludes my presentation. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak at this point, but we're ready to answer any questions, and we look forward to hearing the planning board's thoughts and comments on this proposal.
Just as a point of information so that everybody understands, design review tonight is for the board to see if there's sufficient information, actually the regulations actually say enough information, within what Mr. Shagnon just outlined. He went through and provided pretty much the entire checklist for site plan, which is arguably more than is needed in order to begin this debate on this application. Nothing about design review at this stage approves any aspect of the plan. It's just to know that we have enough information to commence. So details like the landscaping on the sidewalks and even a circulation pattern. If there's something missing, that's what the purpose of tonight is about. If there's something, piece of information that we feel we need and it isn't here, if there was no traffic information, for example, that would be a good thing to say, why didn't you provide traffic? They did. So just, I want people to understand, this is not approval of a project tonight. This is consideration if there's enough information under today's zoning. If there is, then that would vest today's zoning for this application. I did have one technical question, which might be for the attorney. If this is approved, you don't have two vestings, you have one, correct?
Correct. It would be our intent to substitute this approval, this design, for the one prior.
More than intent, I think if you...
It is, yeah.
So if this proceeds, this will be how it proceeds?
Correct.
It will supersede the
It
prior?
will supersede the prior one.
Okay, just so it's clear.
Yeah.
A question, just so I understand that we have enough information. Could you, it's been mentioned several times, could you run through the history of the easement? There was a lot of correspondence from abutters about the concern of that easement.
Sure.
And then today, sort of an announcement that easement's going to be maintained. Can you just very succinctly describe the history?
So
Yeah, please.
there are two properties that Attorney Lyons represents. One's the condominium association, and there's another building next door. Each property has a different set of rights. The condominium association has the...
Can we have a site plan?
Yeah, that'd be great.
while we're
if we could
talking?
bring that up.
Maybe you could point with the pointer. Thanks.
Okay. So this is the access point here, Hill Street. We've been at this project now for well over a year. There's been many different plans submitted. At one point in time, we thought it might make sense to have our tenants go down Hill Street. Well, we don't have that right. That's a private right-of-way. but we do have the right to access to Hanover Street. This access point right here is the right-of-way that has been alleged that has been violated. Now, this is the right-of-way here. There's certainly enough room, not only for a vehicle, but the fire department, there are turning templates that have been in place that John could walk you through that would show that not only can Mr. Lyons' client access that, but so can the public safety vehicles access that as well. So it's our opinion that that right-of-way will be unimpeded and provide access to the condominium association. The other folks do not have any deeded rights to use that.
What other folks?
The next door, the building next door. One's a condominium and the other one is a multifamily building, different ownership.
So the first right is through the Last Chance Garage, is that?
No, this right-of-way here, right now it currently spills out this way.
Right.
And now it's going to go down here. It comes-
You're proposing to move it.
Yeah, we're proposing to move it, and we have an access easement that gives us the right to do that. So under that access agreement, we're proposing that everybody who has the right is going to continue to have that right. The question is whether or not other people have that right. We don't think they do. If they do, it's a matter of adverse possession. There are no deeded rights for that. Now, that is an issue for another day in another form. It's never been the policy of this board to determine parties' legal rights. I'm sure it comes up all the time in different applications, but with respect to this application, there is an allegation that those rights are being impeded. We say they're not. Superior Court has scheduled a hearing in May, and we're going to have that. We're going to learn what is at least initially decided. But we think for the purposes of today, we meet the design review standards, and we think we meet the provisions of the zoning ordinance, and we don't believe we're violating the access easement. And for the folks that have the right, now, whether the public has that right to use it, that's a different question. We don't think the public has that right. And I don't think Attorney Lyons disagrees with me. You know, Hill Street is a private right-of-way. And that's, that's a whole nother animal.
Related, I saw your hand up, but related to this, the Last Chance Garage, its access will also be over this relocated
Yes.
easement? Is that, you're creating a new parcel, but the rights that you have extend to the existing parcel before the lines are drawn?
Yes, and I believe, I don't believe there's any dispute with the folks who have that right to continue to use that.
Bill, you had a question.
Yeah, this is not as helpful as it would be if you instead had the drawings of the property as it's going to be prepared, not the way it is today. So the egress or the transit that you're showing is through a parking lot, which
right
will no longer be there.
Yeah, so that would be the right, the access would be here and here.
And somehow people have been of the mind that the intent was that the access would be through the little alley next to where the Building D is. In fact, Building D would infringe on that a little bit.
I think right now, because Building D's not there, and it's a parking lot, people just go the path of least resistance and they cut through that. And there's no question that that's what people do, but the access agreement allows us to relocate it, which is here. The bottom line is, people who have the right to access will continue to have the right to access. The question is, who has the right to access?
Well, the people that have filed the lawsuit and others have not envisioned the path that you're now proposing. So I'm a little confused why this path has arisen at the 11th hour after a lawsuit, and why.
Well, that's been on our plan. That was on our plan last year. John may want to add something to that.
The plan that you have before you was submitted some time ago, and it shows if you go back to the subdivision plan, it clearly states that there'll be a relocated easement. If you look at the submitted material, currently, there's a claim, rightfully so, that there was an easement that was 10 feet from this line. That's where the physical location on the maps, the deeded easement was. Obviously, that's not usable now because it goes through parked cars. So the Heinemann Building, the condo association negotiated with the condominium association here, and they came to an agreement that as long as they provided an access, that this lot could move that access. That's clearly in the deed. Does that answer the question?
Not really.
We don't, that's, as was pointed out, this isn't going to get resolved
It's
at
not going to
this
get
board.
resolved tonight. It's not going to get resolved. in this-
The issue of access has been addressed. I suspect we'll hear an opposing viewpoint on how it's been
And I
depicted.
suggested it's irrelevant tonight. What I say, what Attorney Lyons say, it really has nothing to do with design review. We say we have the right. They say we don't. We're going to find out.
We understand how that works in a different venue. The question is, does the board feel there's enough information to proceed?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of reiterate what the two of you just said. I was just asking the question to see if it generated things we wanted in a future meeting. I feel
There's enough to talk about.
is enough.
This will have been seen by TAC before we see it again, so there'll be some technical expertise.
Yes, our plan is to submit the TAC immediately.
You can get to design review with less information than has been presented on this application tonight.
Because it does seem that, at least in some representations of it, that choke point is not going to work in the future state. So
There are some issues that we will discuss, whether, I don't think they'll get resolved here.
Yep.
But that's why there's a hearing scheduled in a real court. Any other questions, the applicant? Folks understand what we're doing in terms of just getting enough information to get to the next step and then talk about the details of how things are laid out. That's future meetings. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing. Round one, is anyone here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Three.
I'm going to run this.
Yes, please.
Chair Chelman, member of the board, I'm Attorney John Lyons, and I represent two direct abutters, the Harbor Place Condominium Association and Hill Hanover. And I appreciate the chairman's comments that we're here for design review tonight, and I also appreciate the board is not a court of law. You're a quasi-judicial board, so we can't get into those issues that will be brought before the court, and there is a hearing pending. I would say, however, that by filing suit, it certainly helps people get religion. I've been before in this room, before the ZBA, et cetera. This is the first time this applicant has admitted that there is a right-of-way across their property, despite whatever else they've represented. Secondly, there is a deeded right-of-way running along the easterly side of the parking lot. It's not willy-nilly. There also is two parties here, Hill Street Condominium, and there's a number of members here, unit owners, and Hill Hanover, and their principals are here. And what the applicant is trying to do is split them. The Harbor Place Condominium Association arose out of the same exact deed with Hill Hanover. Hill Hanover also has a right-of-way. I'd also indicate that the site plan that created the Kearsarge Mill Condominium Association specifically says in it that there is an easement to the Hill Hanover Group, LLC. So one of the things I did hear my friend John Bozen say, though, was He thought we would be able to address all of the concerns of the abutters. That certainly involves us, so maybe we'll be able to talk about these things. But we do believe that the issues that I've raised in my suit do ultimately directly affect your ultimate approval. While they may not be directly relevant tonight, and John is probably right, you're here for design approval. But certainly all of these issues are specifically relevant to the ultimate approval of what's before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application?
Anybody on Zoom?
Nobody's raised their hand.
Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Charlie Moreno. I'm a resident of 50 Cornwall Street, so I'm in the neighborhood. And I'm not speaking to or for, but I just have a couple of major concerns about, and I know that the deep dive will be once the application is before the board, but maybe they can consider this now. First thing is, I don't think they've planned for enough trees, and I mean large trees, and specifically along Hanover Street. Even if this means to set the buildings back a little bit, these are robust buildings. They completely cover the site between the infrastructure and the buildings. They're tall. It's going to really change the look, and the city needs more trees, big trees. And by not planning for that now, space for that now, that's going to stay with us for a long time. So that's one of the considerations. Secondly, I don't know, I went to the site walk, I don't know, 6-9 months ago. The city owns the land directly behind the building. It's kind of a no man's land, but there's, I don't know the exact size, footprint of that. I don't think it's quite a quarter of an acre, but our property sits on 1/10 of an acre, and it was recently valuated at $475,000. So there's value to that land, and the public has no access to that, and they haven't designed that into their plan. And I don't see a lot of like public benefit from this project. They are going to put a huge imprint onto the neighborhood. As long as they follow the zoning, no problem. But I think the give back ought to be a little more than what we're seeing here. And either they purchase that land from the city because we can't reach that, we can't access it, or even better, perhaps they can swap land or make something of a pocket park there with access, because now you have another 100 residents or more into this neighborhood. And the Rock Street Park, which is fabulous, is, it's just going to be a lot of people. So a little more green space. I would really argue that something be done, that the developers provide access to that land and back, and that the city plan for at least a pocket park, or if that can't be done, that the developer purchases that land so that it's not no man's land, because they're going to end up with it by default. No one can access it, and that's not right. So those are my 2 comments.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to, for, or against this application?
Hi, my name is Robin Husledge, and I live at 27 Rock Street, and apologies for the late handing out. I sent it a longer piece last night, but I had an extra H in the email address, so it didn't make it to you guys. So I tried to shorten this, and I'll try to give a very quick summary. One of my main issues about the development is the traffic study, which is chock full of errors. First off, my street that I live on, Rock Street, they have in the traffic study as being 28 feet wide. It is not even 18 feet wide, and there's parking along one side. So it is a tiny street, and cars have to squeeze by as is. And the bigger trucks, they come up on the sidewalk right next to my house to get by. The traffic study also did not include traffic on Rock Street, Sudbury Street, or Pearl Streets, or the intersections of Rock Street and Islington and Pearl Street and Islington. Two primary streets, Pearl and Rock, coming, what they say is those are the two main streets to come in to their development, and they're just not built for that kind of traffic. The proposed location for the traffic, for the entrance and exit on Hanover Street, I did a little pictorial so you could see it's going to be a nightmare right there on Hanover Street and Rock Street. We've got a lot going on there. So it just does not make sense to locate the entrance to that development at that location. Another graphic on the second page shows a proposed solution, which is to have the traffic come in and exit on Foundry Place. Those streets are meant for commercial, high-volume traffic. Our neighborhood is not. The only change that would have to happen is there's a gate at the Rotary and just sliding that up to Sudbury Street, and that way they can enter and exit without entering our neighborhood, and keep all that traffic outside of our neighborhood. The other benefit is the visitors that are coming in, they'll just pull into the garage and park there and pay the city, as opposed to taking a parking spot away from the residents in our very, very tightly no parking neighborhood. So we really need the board's critical eye to scrutinize what's being presented in this project's traffic study, which is really full of errors. These are just some of the highlights there. We have to live with what you decide for the next 100+ years. Therefore, I respectfully request that you postpone your design review of this version and revoke your design approval of the prior version of this project until an accurate traffic study is submitted with this request, as an accurate traffic study is critical in order to fully evaluate the proposed design. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to or for or against this application?
Good evening, Nicole Lapierre, Direct Abutter, 44 Rock Street. I just want to thank the gentleman who pointed out the issue of a lack of green space. And I had also have raised at various meetings regarding this property, the public land. That is of huge concern. And it not being able to be accessed by the public is a great issue. I would also say, in terms of the traffic, as my neighbor Robin Husledge was more eloquently speaking to it, I think alone with the inadequate and inaccurate and incomplete traffic study, that's enough to postpone the review. I know that we had a site walk in the summer. I hope that everyone in this room and watching has had the opportunity to take a vehicle and drive through that neighborhood. It is a very different experience. I just remain concerned with too many loopholes, and as a layperson, it's irrelevant, but I don't understand how you wouldn't go to TAC that addresses safety first. I know they will, so I'll wait that out. And I also find it mind-boggling as a layperson that there's this court case, but yet you can still approve I don't know. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Peter Hapney. I have a business and residence at the end of Rock Street. I'd like to update a little bit. There aren't too many people that have been in the neighborhood that long. There are a lot of new people moved in. They have no real connection of what's occurred in that building and that space. JSA was there for years. They had between 60 to 80 people working there. Heidemann was there for years, and they had over 100 people working and parking in that lot. Rock Street is a small street. Pearl Street is another street. One of the issues with the Rock Street Park is people play, kids play in the traffic circle, basketball stuff comes over the thing. Traffic in that traffic circle does not need to be increased. You also have about 20 times a year that you cannot get out Foundry Place because it's traffic, is 4th of July type of thing. You can't get out. If I was going to buy a place and I couldn't exit my location, I'd be very concerned. Hanover Street has 3 possible exits. You can go down Sudbury, you can go down Hanover to downtown, and you can go Pearl to any place else. Foundry Place is a one-way street, and it's getting more confused with other buildings opening up. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic, and you're going to amp it up quite quickly by throwing another group of people coming down from the project. And I would say that with the present situation, people don't really know what goes on in the park. They're on the other part of the thing. They don't deal with the traffic that's there already and the amount of problems that it'll present by doing that. And I would suggest that they look at some of the history of the area and see what's occurred there and realize that, sure, there's going to be more traffic. There's more traffic where I live, too. We call it the 5-Storyville down there now. Everything's 5 stories. So I would advocate that the traffic should come out onto Hanover Street. It's a logical thing. People can get out of there at all times of the day, and there's times that I can't get out Foundry Place. And that's a concern if I was going to have residents, knowing that I would be blocked at certain times. Again, it's about 20 times a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to or against this application? Anybody on Zoom?
Nobody's raised their hand.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, I'm Marcy Vaughn. I'm a direct butter. I live at 407 Hanover Street. And I understand tonight that this is a really low bar. If I understand it correctly, and I'm not sure that I do, the real question here tonight is, do you have enough information to understand essentially what this project is? And I don't think you do. Because as far as I can tell, you don't know what the buildable area is. And they can't say for certain what the buildable area is. So if you don't know what portion of this property can be built upon, it seems I can't, as a layperson, understand how you know enough about the project to accept it for design review. Another thing that I will say is I think I heard you say, Mr. Chairman, that the issue of traffic, if the traffic study is incorrect or incomplete, that is relevant for tonight. So as I mentioned in my public comment, I think it's very important to pay attention to the corner of Sudbury and Rock Street. That's where my house is. So Rock Street will abut this project on one side. Sudbury feeds right into it. Sudbury is a one-way street, and it is on the left of Sudbury Street is the Rock Street Park, which is very popular in our neighborhood. All the kids play there. And at that stop sign between Sudbury and Rock, there's a ton of traffic. There are people going down that road looking for parking in the Rock Street parking lot, circling our neighborhood looking for parking, people dropping off their children at the park, and then there's me backing out of my parking lot onto Rock Street. And that particular intersection isn't part of their traffic study. I can assure you that one day a week, at least, I nearly get in an accident pulling out of my parking lot. So that is a foreseeable risk that you don't have any information about. And so that's the second element here, where I think that you simply just don't have enough information to accept this for design review. And then the last thing I'll say is that although this is a low bar, although there's not very much for you to consider here, it's still important. And precision is important on these specific issues that are at issue tonight. And precision has been neglected by the city and by this board when it comes to our neighborhood. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse with this, but we really care about our neighborhood, and we need you to care too. So I really thank you for your attention to this.
Thank you. Anybody else here or on Zoom wish to speak to or against this application?
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Mark DiLorenzo. I'm a direct abutter at 349 Hanover Street. One item that Robin mentioned was the misinformation with the traffic study, at least as far as the fire truck I sent you in comments. I don't know if you noticed, but the traffic study showed the fire truck careening through one of the parked cars that is missing from all of their drawings. No parking spaces behind the buildings on Hill Street, which are deeded parking spots, appear in any of the drawings. And these vehicles take up 8 to 10 feet. And so if you have a fire truck going through what is now 8 to 10 feet less of space, you're going to see something very different. So I highly encourage you to read my commentary. I showed pictures of how it really is versus how they showed it to be. There's a proposed fence that would cause an obstruction that the fire truck shows plowing right through it. So that will have to be rebuilt daily or every time there's a fire. Please ask, what I'm saying is it's not complete. Deeded parking spaces aren't there that need to be shown and taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here or on Zoom wish to speak to or for against this application? Any second round speakers? Those who've already spoken. Anybody wish to speak again in second round? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Folks understand what we're doing or not? If you have a question.
I'll make a motion if you'd like. Is that a yes? Sorry.
Yes.
Vote to find the design review process is complete.
I'll second.
Discussion.
Well, Tony made the motion, so.
You know, you were waving your.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Paul.
A vote to approve this motion isn't accepting the project. What it's saying to me is that I do have enough information to understand the project and the concerns in the project. So I'm supportive of the motion made by the Vice Chairman.
Yeah, I think the residents raise a lot of good points, and moving forward will allow us to challenge, what will be the final submission to this is not yet. Right. They're going to go to TAC. The fire department's going to look at these issues, and is going to give us a report on their opinion, as will other departments in the city. But do I understand what this project is? I have enough information that I feel like I do.
Right. And just to clarify the point on the traffic, if there was no traffic information, that was the point I tried to make earlier. They did submit traffic information. Have we accepted their traffic information? No. It's just, they did do a traffic study. There were a lot of points raised tonight that need to be considered. And TAC will also look at those. So, just a point of clarification. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Design review is complete. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is request of David and Tracy Foster as owners for property at 200 FW Hartford Drive, requesting wetland conditional use permit from section 10-1017-50 for removal of 6 trees with a 100-foot wetland buffer. This property is on Assessor's Map 270, Lot 33, and lies within the Single Residence B or SRB district. Who is here to present this application?
Good evening. This is Tracy Foster of 200 FW Hartford. Do we have up the slides?
Yeah, could you step up a little bit closer to the microphone?
Sure. Is that better?
Yes, that is better.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Sorry about that. Thank you for having me. This has already gone through the wetlands conditional use permit and was approved. The house is located, half of my house is located within the buffer to begin with. I am asking to have 6 trees removed in the backyard, and I'm asking to then replace those with an additional 6 trees and/or bushes. That has been approved by the wetland conditional use people, and now we're here at this step
to have that approval to have 6 trees removed and replaced. Are there a lot more details that we need? Or?
You can present more, or you can stop there for questions, whichever you
Sure,
prefer.
can we pull that up a little bit? No, the one you have there, can you zoom in a little bit, please? Is this one on?
Just don't touch the screen.
You can.
The screen is a touch screen.
Oh, yes, I know.
We're all parents.
Thank you for zooming in. My house is, if you can see here, this line here, the green line, that is the buffer zone. More than half of my house resides in it. These 6 trees here, especially this one, this is a tree that's been identified at risk. It's got rot at the bottom of it. And we are asking definitely to have that one down, and I'd like to take these ones down due to the moss that's growing all over my roof and the mold on the back of my house. In addition to other factors, but these are the 6. And given the fact that this area is all basically wooded area. I have a small backyard here. The rest is all woods where these are coming out, like naturally grown wooded area. We will attempt to plant additional trees, replacement trees, in or around the same general vicinity as to where we're taking out the trees. The trees that are coming out will have the stumps remain in place. That's our plan. This is how the backyard looks from the back of my porch. This is the rotted tree right here. This tree, and then there's 2 more trees in another picture. And these are the other 2 trees here, given the location in proximity to the house. Are there any additional questions in regards to?
Any questions of the applicant? Yes, Beth.
It seems like most of the trees that you're actually taking down, are they pine trees?
2 of them are maple and the rest are pine.
And what is exactly are you replacing them with? I mean, if the problem is these trees grow too tall, are there species that would grow shorter so you could replace all of them, but they would actually be shorter and not shadow your house as much?
Correct. So the proposed trees, 2 of the trees are maple trees, the other ones are indeed pine. I suggested that in my plan that I would replace with either a bush that is native, it has berries, winterberry bush, or or maple trees. The maple trees, you bring up a valid point, but the wetland conditional use people, they wanted all trees and not the bushes, which I found a little strange, but it was a recommendation from them. And you bring up a valid point that I don't want to put anything overly large in those places for that reason.
Right, and I don't know what the concern with the bushes is, other than sometimes they get overgrown and then become invasive if they are not maintained. And that might have been the Conservation Commission's concern on that. But I would want to see as many trees put in as possible, but maybe different species that would be good for the wetland buffer, but at the same time aren't causing you those issues as well.
Correct. To be honest, I'm open to suggestions but these are the trees that I had picked at the time, and whatever is going to be suitable for the area once one, I can get these trees down, and 2, find a suitable place to be able to plant one, because there's high bush blueberries all through that area and other native species that are wild.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Did you have a suggestion, Beth, on trees?
I mean, I'm not a real tree expert, but there's a lot of other people out there that are.
There sure are.
I mean, I purposely have put short trees. I mean, I work at an office building that has wetlands behind us, and there are all these tall, thin pine trees. And when the storm comes, my office is probably 20 feet from them. I'm waiting, and I'm on the 3rd floor. I'm going to be dead. So we do have a tree company that comes out to the complex every single year evaluates all the trees so that we can make sure we can stay on top of them, so that hopefully that doesn't happen, but we always have issues.
Which is the two that are on the right-hand side of that photo. That's the case. They're skinny winnies, and they're tall.
Right.
And if you look out, you might not have seen it in the picture, but as you look out my back deck from basically where these trees are, the next set of vegetation, it's not vegetation, they're all dead. They've all fallen. Limbs have been falling down. Trees are falling. I got trees leaning into other trees. It's a mess back there, and I don't need one of them falling on my house. That's really where we're at right now.
The Conservation Commission did seem like they would like to have more trees. If you had somebody suggest lower trees that wouldn't grow as tall, would you be open to having a few more trees planted?
I would be open to it. It depends on how it all presents itself once we drop these other ones and see what is viable. Like I said, there's there's high bush, lower growing high bush blueberries throughout that entire area that are all native and wild. So I have to find suitable places to be able to actually dig a hole to put a tree in.
Sure. Tony?
Do you have a certified arborist report that states those 5 other trees should be removed?
I have a certified arborist stating that the one diseased tree definitely needs to go, and it is suggested by every arborist that's come to my backyard that the other ones go due to
Have you provided that report to
I
the
don't have it in written form. They've all been verbal to me.
Even the diseased one? I thought you had
The
said-
diseased one I have in written form from an arborist, yes.
Okay.
That is the closest one, closest proximity to my house, and that is not good.
Does the city have an arborist on?
We do.
We do.
They have a really cool truck, too. Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming before the board. I can't tell you how many of these applications we've seen that are after the fact, people that have cut the trees and then said, oh, no. So thank you.
Yes.
I don't want to set a scary precedent, because I think 2 or 3 of those after the fact permits that we've done have been on this street specifically. So I'm just weary that we set a precedent saying, oh, because it's not cosmetically pleasing, or there's a future threat, future concern, that we start cutting down trees. I understand the concern of having a tree fall on your roof. 100% can empathize with you there. The smaller of the 2 trees that you pointed out and are included in your proposal, I don't personally see the threat by those, but nonetheless, it would be very helpful to have some sort of planting plan associated with this, because it's in the buffer, because this is a highly protected part of Portsmouth. And
Yes, I understand that, but I would love to say, oh, I'm going to plant it right there, but I can't do that because of all the other vegetation. I'm going to have to literally walk in the area of those areas and say, okay, now that this is down, where did the roots go of that? Where can I find a hole, a place that I can dig a hole big enough that's suitable to plant a tree in? And I'm totally willing to do that. The Wetland Conservation Committee were like, we frankly don't care where you plant it. It doesn't have to be right next to it. As long as you plant it within your backyard, they were happy and content with that. And I'm like, that's great, because that gives me the flexibility that I'm going to need. I'm fighting wild roses. I'm fighting wild high bush blueberries, other pine trees that are growing in the backyard. And some of it, I only have so much that's on my property. So, I mean, and they were willing to even say it doesn't have to be on your property. If it's behind your house and in the general area and it's not on your property, we're okay with that. And I said, oh, that's great. Thank you.
great. So as long as there's awareness and willingness.
Oh, absolutely. I've got mold growing all over the back of my house, and mold and moss on the top of my roof because of these trees. And I like trees. I want to plant more. I have no problem doing that. I just need to have flexibility as to where to put them.
Perfect.
And in my plan, where I've highlighted in green, my intent is to put them in the, relatively speaking, same general areas to where I dropped them.
Well, we appreciate that.
If the city arborist gave you 6 locations to plant 6 trees, would you be acceptable with that?
I think if you walk in my backyard, I mean, anybody can say, hey, wait a minute, we got obstacles here. We're going to have to move around that. I think anybody could tell me I could do that I think the people who have come to my yard and said, hey, this is what we can do for you, can do that. I don't think that that might be worth anybody else's time since we've spent all that time and money already.
It wouldn't be a cost to you for the city, right?
Well, it's the city's time, and time is money coming out.
All right, anyway.
What's that?
We would send Max out.
We could send Max or Kate.
So any other questions to the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
This was also a public hearing, correct?
Yep.
Yes. Is there anybody, we're going to open the public hearing. Is anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application?
Nicole Lapierre, 44 Rock Street. I would like to speak in favor of her application. When a resident comes to you proactively trying to prevent trees from falling on their house, please help them. Please don't give them a hard time. It's a little heart-wrenching in our neighborhood when I'm seeing developers just the whole wetland area on the end of our neighborhood towards Dunkin' Donuts where a new development is going in, trees just gone. Nobody, like, please, it would be irresponsible to not help this woman.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to, for, or against this application? Anybody on Zoom?
No hands.
I'm going to close first. Anybody wish to speak second round speakers? I'm going to close the public hearing. Board discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we vote to find the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.50 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries.
I will continue and make a motion to vote to grant the conditional use permit with the following conditions. 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 as in the staff memo.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Beth.
I'm totally in favor of her getting rid of trees that might, interfere with the house. I like the concept that she talked about regarding the Conservation Commission giving her the flexibility. I think that if she needed help from the city arborist and she asked us, we'd be certainly happy to send someone out to help her, find appropriate locations. So with that satisfies my need. I mean, plant them farther away from the house. That'll help the wetlands, and I think it's a good plan in the end. I think the Conservation Commission did the right thing.
Okay. Andrew, do you have your hand up?
No, all set.
Okay. Any other discussion?
How does one reach the city arborist?
Email or call?
Numbers listed on the city website.
They work for the Department of Public Works.
Okay, Public Works, there you go.
Yes, Tony.
I mean, I know this neighborhood well. There's a lot of homes that have the same situation, and I feel like, while I appreciate the homeowner and I want to help them, I feel like we have to have a standard that is more, clear. We have the Conservation Commission saying, yeah, we can understand the one tree. We really don't see why the other five. And I don't know. I think it's going to be a big burden on the arborist if all of a sudden all these homes are, being requested. The public hearing's closed. So I don't know. I feel like there was an in between, but I get that I'm in the minority here. I just feel like we do hold other properties to higher standards, and I've never seen a Conservation Commission report like this, and at the end it's like, yeah, just approve it. So I'm a little taken back by that.
I understand your comment. Any other discussion?
Are we at a point possibly where this board and Concom should meet and have a workshop of some sort? And
We're going to have a workshop to talk about the wetlands buffer ordinance. Yes. Good idea.
It's in the plan.
Already in the planning. We'll call the vote unless folks want to talk some more. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is a request of Rainboth Revocable Trust as owner for property at 56 Ridges Court, requesting a wetlands conditional use permit in accordance with Section 10-10-1750 to merge 3 lots and construct an addition and deck on an existing dwelling for a proposed permanent buffer impact of 2,653 square feet. Applicant is proposing stormwater improvements and a partial revegetation of the wetland buffer as a part of this project. This property is on Assessor's Map 207, Lot 63, and lies within the single residence or SRB district. Who is here to present this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Chris Mulligan from Hopeful Phoenix. I have with me Eric Weinrib from Altus Engineering, who prepared the plans in the packet for you, and also Michael Rainboth, who is the property owner. Just by way of very deep background, what you have before you is a wetlands conditional use permit application for property at 56 Ridges Court. The property consists of 3 separately tax identified lots that we intend to merge if the application is approved. The main lot, where the main house is on, is almost entirely within the 100-foot wetlands buffer. Almost no part of the 100-foot wetlands buffer on that property has not already been disturbed. The project before you will pull a significant amount of the existing built environment further away from the wetlands resource that the buffer is intended to protect, and it will result in a decrease in the amount of impervious surface and move the driveway further away from the wetlands resource. So there is a fair amount of activity within the wetlands buffer that we're seeking approval for. However, I think the overarching concept here is that it's already a fully developed site in which almost none of the wetlands buffer has not already been disturbed. So with that as background, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who can walk you through the application that he submitted. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, Eric Weinrib with Altus Engineering. I trust Attorney Mulligan trusts me on this application. So Mike and Annie Rainboth live at the corner of Ridges and Newcastle Ave, 122 Newcastle Ave, which is right around the corner from this site. When the property became available, the owner, Kathleen Thompson, sold it to them because they knew that Mike and Annie wanted to keep the house, and they weren't interested in subdividing and increasing the development intensity on the property. Several people wanted to do so, and we had actually met with a few of them. The property is very special to Mike and Annie. When you're looking at this site, across the street on the in the grass right next to the tidal water is where Mike and Annie got married. So they want to live out there. Final years, long final years, being able to look at the place where they tied the knot. As Chris said, it's properties is 3 parcels, totaling 30,962 square feet, and all the built infrastructure is on lot 63. 30,000 square feet is enough for 2 conforming lots of record. So there was a lot of discussion about subdividing it. The backside is served from a paper street. I think that would have been the challenge in getting the frontage and getting the property subdivided, and it's not what they wanted to do. When Mike and Annie first got involved, they hired Easterly to complete the existing conditions survey, and the wetlands were mapped, and you can see in green the wetland delineation. They were pretty disappointed by the wetland delineation because if you've been out to the site, their backyard, the lawn, is that wetland. And so what they did is they actually hired Mark Jacob to come back and check Joe Noel's work because they just couldn't believe that the lawn could have been a wetland. So they had that second opinion, and it confirmed the wetland delineation. Also on the site, in the lower left-hand corner, is the 100-year flood zone. It's elevation 8, and it's way away from the site. Our proposed infrastructure, the basement grade is 11.95, so we don't have any flood zone issues. On the lower right-hand side, the east side, is the 100-foot tidal water buffer. And so you have the area between the green dashed line and the purple line is our 100-foot buffers, and you can see that there's a very little building envelope by right on this property. Sorry. So when they came to looking at redeveloping it, they looked at this property a little bit differently than a lot of people. They didn't want to start with a blank slate. They liked the bones of the existing home. They liked where it was placed, and they liked to value existing property. It's not what we're seeing a lot in the city these days. They came into it, they wanted to keep that existing home. What they realized is the garage and shed and parking lot are all in that wetland buffer. They're long. They're not well constructed. So what they wanted to do, if you can go to the next sheet, is do an addition that respect the wetland buffer, respect the neighborhood, and so that they came off the existing building with an addition and then went down the street or down towards the water with the addition and the deck. That allowed them to have an adequate front yard, not to ruin the view and look and feel of the existing building, and to create some buffer between the streets so you didn't have, just a feeling like you're blocking the feel as you're coming down Ridges Court. And also, Ridges Court is a very narrow road, and it just stops. There's no turnaround or anything. And service vehicles for the city, trash actually backs and recycling back down the road. So by putting this house back, we're creating a driveway that has some depth. We can park some vehicles off the street, which help access on the street. And it also, not that we're providing an easement, but if emergency service vehicles needed to get down there, we have a depth of a driveway that would allow them to turn around. So we're proposing to raise the shed, remove the garage and a lot of the parking, and move everything up closer to the road. The existing shed is 40 feet from the wetland. The new one will be 55 feet. The existing impervious right now is only 32 feet from the wetlands. The new deck will be 51.5 feet. The proposed driveway that's in the wetland buffer will be a permeable surface. In the way the Ridges Court drains down towards the garage, the impervious that's the traditional portion of the driveway draining down towards the permeable will actually infiltrate into the permeable section. You're allowed a 4-to-1 ratio to drain. In addition, in front of the garage, in case there's an icing situation, we did provide a trench drain that drains to the infiltration basin under the deck. The rear of the building, we're having stone drip edges to promote infiltration. Around the existing home, because the existing building is old, the foundation is suspect, we're providing gutters so that we can make sure that the water drains away from goes into the collection system and runs away from the foundation, so we're not having the potential of introducing roof runoff into the basement. Underneath the deck, it's going to be all permeable, so we're directing runoff from around the perimeter of the site and the deck into that permeable area to promote infiltration. That provides treatment, and we're also constructing a swale between the deck and the Vandermeer property to the south to ensure that the runoff coming off of Ridges Court drains away from the abutting property and towards the wetland system. We've gone to Conservation Commission twice. The first time we went, It was with the intent to try to keep that lawn area as a grassed area. It did not go as well as we had expected. We're thinking that removing the pavement, providing treatment, and so forth was going to get a lot of positive impact from Conservation Commission. That really did not turn out to be the case. And so we came back preserving the wetland as naturalizing and creating the 25-foot buffer around it that will be mowed twice a year and not allowed to have mowing from April to July. And we've agreed to that. In my packet, I have the criteria that we addressed for the conditional use permit. I know that you guys are getting a blank stare from me babbling on. I can go through it, or you can say you've read it and you're okay with that.
Well, I know I've read it. Questions of the applicant? Yes, Bill.
Yeah, I'm reading, I'm a little confused. I'm reading a letter from Joseph Noel, who's a certified soil scientist.
And wetland scientist, yeah.
Directed to Mr. Eric Weiner, PE, Altus Engineering.
Yes.
And in that, he says that in part due to the deck expansion, that there will be a net increase in the impermeable area. It's on page 210 of our documents, if you need to try to find it. So the beginning of the discussion here was that there would be a reduction in the net impermeable area, and the soil scientist has said there would be an increase.
I can speak to that. So Mr. Noel prepared his initial report when we had done our initial submission, and we had the deck was a little bit larger, and we were not including permeable pavement in the wetland buffer. And so that flipped that ratio. We did not have Joe go back and revise his report.
So his report is outdated or incorrect, or?
Only in the fact that we made the site a better site by reducing some of the impervious areas.
Okay.
You made the representation that you're reducing it, and based on the changes you've made in the plan, you are reducing it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just to clarify. Any other questions? Yes.
Fairly minor, but you outlined some natural vegetation like boulders, vegetated swales, the like, and in effort to continually reduce the impervious amount of surface on site, is there a consideration or opportunity to use a pervious pavement or asphalt composition?
In what area are you talking about?
In the driveway specifically.
That is an option, but when we looked at the analysis of, first of all, the traditional pavement's outside the wetland buffer. And the way the site is graded, we feel that we're getting the best bang for the buck because a lot of the impervious pavement is draining to permeable surfaces, and DES allows a 4-to-1 ratio of impervious to drain to 1 square foot of permeable. So we feel like we're addressing it by the way we've approached
Yeah,
it.
and this is merely an inquiry, but I like the trench drain aspect, and I see your illustration here. Can you just quickly highlight where that water is flowing and maybe how that is circulating throughout the site?
Sure. If you go to the next sheet. So in front of the garage, there's a trench drain, and that water drains down from the trench drain into a closed drainage system, into a perforated pipe that is underneath the deck. And that deck is a stone surface, and it's got stone underneath it, and it's basically a stormwater leach field.
And so that will permeate straight down?
Straight
or out?
down.
Any other questions of the applicant? Yes, Paul.
Does the applicant currently own all 3 lots, 63, 68 and 69?
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, sorry. Eric, you're aware of the suggested amendments outlined in the staff memo?
Yes.
And you accept those?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Last call. Anybody here or on Zoom wishes to speak to, for, or against this application? Close the public hearing.
Vote to find that the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.1017.50 of the ordinance and adopts finding of fact as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention.
Vote to grant the conditional use permit with the following conditions. I'm not going to read them all, but it's 2.1 through 2.5 outlined in the staff memo.
Second.
Any discussion?
I can read them if you want.
You don't, I don't want you to. Yes. Beth.
I think that this is improving the lot. I think that actually removing the lawn and having the no-cut buffer is really going to help to improve the, drainage and everything else. And I think it's a really good plan. I like that they're pulling the buildings farther away from the actual wetlands. So overall, a huge improvement to probably what exists and how it works today. So
And the fact that they're merging 3 lots into one is a big deal.
that
so.
is very helpful as well.
It's good conduct and kind of a good template to instruct future homeowners in that sensitive buffer area. Here's what can be done, here's what should be done, and the fact that we have a operation plan in place is also really helpful for not only this owner but the future owners. I think that's the education that we've been talking about for a long time at this level.
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention again. Thank you very much. We have a request to postpone the request of Aviation Avenue Group as owner for Kane Management LLC for property at 100 New Hampshire Avenue, requesting amended site plan approval to modify a prior condition of approval. This property is on Assessor's Map Lot 308, Lot 1, and lies in Pease Industrial District.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have another request to postpone?
Yep.
We also have, this is new business, request to postpone the request of 909 West End LLC owner for property at 909 Islington Street, requesting a conditional use permit in accordance with section 10.1112.62 to allow 114 parking spaces where 119 are required. This property is on Assessor's Map 172, Lot 7, and lies within Character District 4.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item, new business, request of Kent and Jennifer Bonnewell as owner for property located at 332 Hanover Street, requesting a conditional use permit from section 10.814 for construction of a new single-family dwelling containing an attached accessory dwelling unit. This property is on Assessor's Map 126, Lot 43, and lies within Character District 4-L1. Who is here to present this application?
Good evening, board members. My name is Mark Giannini from Portsmouth Architects. I'm here representing the property owners at 332 Hanover, Kent and Jen Bonnewell. I'm also joined tonight by Kent Bonnewell, Richard Jardin of our office, Ben Chardonnau of Stiletto Construction, and Chris Mulligan of Huffle Phoenix. Tonight, we're here to request a conditional use permit for an attached accessory dwelling unit for a planned new single-family home on the property. Just to give a brief history of the project, there was a similar-looking application that was in front of the ZBA late last year. For that application, they were seeking 3 variances. One of them was a density relief for 2 units on the lot. The board denied that application due to the hardship of the density request. But tonight's application that's in front of you is a fully conforming application for both the proposed single family as well as the attached ADU. This application, we also met with planning staff before submitting it to get any input. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not seeking any relief for any part of the project. Currently, the lot also has a demo permit for the existing single-family home that is on the site. If you go back one page to the cover sheet. Thank you, Peter. So on the cover sheet here, obviously we've got our location map and an image of the proposed structure. But more importantly, we've got the zoning table outlining that we're in the character district CDL4, or CD4L1, excuse me. The existing single-family home that's on the site is a non-conforming structure. As you can see on the table, the existing column outlines the nonconformities in blue. And then in the next column over is the proposed structure showing that all elements zoning related here for the proposed element do conform to the current zoning. If we go to the next page to the survey, this is the existing site. The site is unique in a number of features, one being that it's bordered on 3 sides by streets, which basically requires that it has front yard setback on 3 sides. In this particular zone, we have a maximum setback, so there's 12-foot maximum setbacks on 3 sides. On the east side, which is on the uppermost edge of the page, is a side yard setback with a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 20. Other unique features of the site are there's a long, extensive curb cut that starts at the corner of Hanover and Tanner Street on the bottom right there, and basically extends up about 3/4 of the Tanner lot line. There's also a large slope, or a large change in grade, sloping from Tanner side on the right down about 10 feet to the Hanover side. The existing building, the way it's sited on the property, just real quick before you go, the existing building that's sited on the property as well as the shed in the rear are both tight to the east property line. The shed is bordering the property line, and then the rear corner of the existing single-family home is about 1 foot off the property line. Again, some of the nonconformities. Moving on to the next page. Images of the existing house, just to give you some context of what's there. The property itself has been unlived in for a while, as well as unmaintained. You can see in the pictures to the bottom right, that's the large curb cut that exists and is non-conforming. The middle upper right picture shows the Tanner Street, Parker Street, and the slope as it comes down from front to back. Moving on. The next page is contextual photos. These are also abutters as well as some other projects nearby, but the uppermost right is Parker Street, 3-story mansard, similar to what we're proposing and existing there. The next one over is Kitty Corner across from on Hanover Street. This is a 3.5-story existing building that's condominiumized at the moment. The middle row of photos are directly across this property on Hanover Street. These are all 2.5-story apartment units. And then the 3 photos on the bottom are, again, just mansards that are in the area to give some context to, close buildings that have a similar size, or not size, similar design elements to what we're proposing. And in the instance of our project and the zoning, a mansard is one of the 5 roof types that are allowed. So this sheet illustrates the first floor plan as well as its architectural site plan. As I mentioned earlier, the kind of uniqueness of the property, we've got the 3 front yard setbacks on the bottom, on the left and right. This helped inform some of the design decisions, having to actually touch those and extend over them. Helped develop the footprint of the actual building. On the uppermost edge of the page, the east side of the building has actually been pulled back from the property line from what currently exists. So we're behind the 5-foot setback that's required, and also providing a larger space between what is there now and the abutter to that side of the property. So the reason we're here tonight for the ADU, this is outlined here in blue. It's just under 750 square feet, which is the maximum allowed for the space. It's a 1-bedroom unit with a shared kind of kitchen living room and this bathroom. We're providing 6 parking spaces for this development. 3 are in garages, so they're covered. One of those covered parking spaces is allotted to the ADU. And then we have 3 additional parking spaces that are in the driveway outside. So we're providing 3 more parking spaces that are required by zoning. This will also reduce, the amount of on-street parking that this property will require or use in an area where off-street parking is used quite a bit. Other elements that are required and shown in the design here. We have the front entrance to the single-family home is in the middle there, facing Hanover Street. It has a porch, which is also part of the character district, or one of the elements recommended in the character district for the front entry. The front entrance, as you'll see when we get to the elevations, is 3 feet above the sidewalk, which is another requirement. The ADU entrance is a secondary entrance shown on the bottom of the page there along Parker Street that has a sidewalk that will then take people to Hanover Street where there is currently a city sidewalk. Parker Street doesn't have any sidewalk on it currently. And if we continue on from there to the next page, Peter. This is the 2nd and 3rd floor, so this is the main area of the single-family residence. It's a fairly standard 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, and deck that's on the garage or above the garage. You'll see here on the front elevation, the north elevation there is facing Hanover Street. Again, the couple of the requirements for the character district are the front entrance not being more than 3 feet above the sidewalk. So we're at 3 feet. We've also taken the front entrance and stepped it back to help provide some relief and some changes in the front elevation. And then the building height itself is where are we at? We are at 29 feet 3 inches, which is well below the maximum building height of 40 feet. On the elevation to the right there, you'll see that's the Parker Street elevation. So again, the sloping grade going from right to left. And then that's a secondary entrance that would be the entrance into the ADU. The next elevation sheet, the east elevation is facing the butter on Hanover Street. In an attempt to provide some privacy, there are no windows on the first floor. That's also a garage space. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that facade there of the garage is more than 5 feet from the property line behind the 5-foot setback. As you go up to the 2nd and 3rd floor, that steps back another 10 feet. And that's where we first introduced windows. So again, the area is even further back from the abutters. And then in the rear Tanner Court elevation on the right there, it shows you the 3 single car garage doors. Is another element required by the ADU for zoning is to have garage doors that don't exceed 9 feet in width. And finally, this is just a perspective view of the house from Hanover, looking to the west. With that, I'll kind of go over the different zoning requirements that we have in our cover letter. And then Chris Mulligan will have a few words as well. So for 10.18.4.12, one accessory dwelling unit shall be allowed for any lot containing a single-family dwelling. An accessory dwelling unit shall not be allowed under the section 10.18.14 or 10.8.14, lot containing more than dwelling. This is a single-family dwelling unit that we've proposed on the site, which allows for an accessory dwelling unit. 8.14.13, except as provided elsewhere in the section. In order for a lot to be eligible for an accessory dwelling unit, the lot and the proposed structures and additions to existing structures shall conform to all zoning regulations as follows. Refer to sheet. So as we showed on the cover sheet, the proposed project meets all zoning for the ADU. For 18.14.21, the principal dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit shall not be separated in ownership, including by condominium ownership. Sorry. The principal dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit will not have a separate ownership. It will be owned by the Bonniwells and no other entity. Yeah, 8.14.22, either the principal dwelling unit or the accessory dwelling unit shall be occupied by the owner's principal place of residence, and the owner shall provide documentation demonstrating compliance with the provision of the satisfaction of the city. Again, the principal dwelling unit in this case will be occupied by the listed property owner, in this case the applicant, upon completion. 8.14.24, neither the principal dwelling unit nor the accessory dwelling unit shall be used for any business except for the property owner that may have a home occupancy or occupation used at the unit that he or she occupies. Again, in this case, neither the principal dwelling unit nor the accessory dwelling will be used for any other business except a home occupation as allowed by the zoning ordinance. 8.14.25, where municipal sewer service is not provided, the septic system shall meet requirements. In this case, where we have municipal water and sewer on site, so that won't be affected. 8.14.26, one off-street parking space shall be provided for an ADU in addition to the spaces that are required in the principal dwelling unit. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're required 3 parking spaces total, 1 for the ADU, and we have provided 6, so that will provide relief of on-street parking in the neighborhood. 8.14.31, an interior door shall be provided between the principal dwelling unit and the AADU. In this case, we've provided an interior door between the garages and provides access into the principal unit as well. 8.14.32, the attached dwelling unit should not be larger than 750 square feet in gross living area. In this case, we are at 749 square feet, as we showed on the plan. 8.14.33, the ADU shall be subordinate to the principal dwelling unit in scale, height, and appearance as follows. If there are 2 or more doors in the front of the principal dwelling unit, one door shall be designated as the principal entrance, and the other door will be designated to appear as a secondary. So as we showed on the elevations, the principal dwelling unit and the principal entrance will be facing Hanover Street, and the secondary entrance, which is the one to the ADU, is on the side street. 8.14.5, where the creation of an accessory dwelling unit involves the construction of a new building or in addition to an expansion of an existing building, the exterior design shall be architecturally consistent with or similar in appearance to the principal building using the following design standards. The new building, addition, or expansion shall be architecturally consistent with or similar in appearance to the existing principles with respect to the following elements: massing, including the shape, form, building footprint, roof, and any project elements. Roof, I'll try to paraphrase: roofing, forms, slopes, siding, materials, textures, window spacing, shapes. And then the other next paragraph of this is provide following elements shall be architecturally consistent with or similar in appearance to the corresponding elements in the principal building. In this case, we've designed the ADU so that it's completely within the single-family home. It's within the massing and the footprint, and all of the features of the building, the design intent of the building, and all the elements outlined in the zoning are basically all one and the same. 1814.53, if provided on any or all street-facing garage doors should be limited to 9 feet. In this case, all doors on the back of the building are under 9 feet. 814.623, the site plan provides adequate and appropriate open space and landscaping for both the ADU and the principal dwelling unit and complies with off-street parking requirements. As we showed on sheet A3, which is the floor plan and site plan, we've provided landscaping around the property. There are pervious pavers that lead from the various entries to the edge of the property, sidewalks on Hanover Street. Where was I? Excuse me. 814.624, the ADU maintain compatible relationship with the character of adjacent and neighboring properties in terms of location, design, and off-street parking layout, and not significantly reduce the privacy of adjacent properties. So as I was mentioning earlier when we were looking at the property elevations and the site plan, we've stepped the building back away from the eastern side of the property line. We've been thoughtful on window placement so that we don't have windows directly looking into abutters. We've got streets to provide spacing between the property and abutters, again, for all the same reasons. And that was the last item for the zoning. So with that, I will hand this over to Chris Mulligan to say a few words, and then we can take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Chris Mulligan from Hopeful Phoenix. I'm standing in for my colleague Kevin Baum, who could not be here tonight. But I just wanted to address a couple of items in addition to what Mark just discussed. I know you've received some communications from members of the neighborhood in opposition to this project. And what I want to just point out is that the opposition that, or the basis for the opposition as it's been articulated is primarily a dislike of the size, mass, and scale of the project as it's proposed. And I just want to point out that size, mass, and scale is regulated by the zoning ordinance's dimensional standards, all of which we meet entirely for this project. There are additional comments and commentary to the effect that an argument is being made that a conditional use permit is required, or in order to get a conditional use permit, we're required to pass a standard in the general conditional use permit section of the ordinance, section 243. There is actually a provision in section 243, it's 243.30, which states that where specific standards or criteria are set forth in the ordinance for a particular use permitted by conditional use permit, those standards and criteria shall apply in lieu of the general standards in section 10.243. So to the extent the opposition that you've received to this project cites the alleged failure to comply with the requirements of section 243, that argument is misplaced. The requirements that we need to comply with are found at section 814.62. As Mark has stated, we comply with all of the zoning requirements, and we comply with section 814.62 in its entirety, and the project should be approved on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
I have a general question, I think more for the board. Do we use ITE standard of a parking space 9 by 20, or do we use
8.5 by 19.
Thank
you. Am I right in reading this that there is a 5-foot difference between the living room and kitchen to the bedroom? So like the garage space is on one level with the bedroom and then everything else is 5 feet lower?
For the ADU?
Yeah.
Yes.
And does this have a basement?
There's planned to have a partial basement.
I was going to say, because I'm trying to figure out where you're putting mechanicals.
Yeah, so there'll be a basement under the ADU. So basically the blue area will have a basement underneath it. There's a on the right there, there's an exterior stair.
Yep.
That would lead you into the basement. There's also.
Okay, I see that door down there.
Yeah, and there's also a stair in the main entrance
That goes
in the
down.
foyer that would also go down to the basement.
And the parking spot behind the ADU garage, that's going to be used just by the ADU, correct?
Correct. So they'll have actually 2 spots, one for a guest.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have.
Another staff question. We deal with primary street frontage, secondary street frontage, but tertiary street frontage. Is this interpreted correctly?
Yes, I mean, it's uncommon, but we have it in certain, and so we just apply another front setback on that tertiary road.
Wow.
It seems very, I've never seen that before. That seems very restrictive for the lot. What's the logic behind that?
Well, in the character district, you have a maximum setback, so you have to build within the setback. So it really doesn't, I don't think, hurt this because
it
you
can
want,
be
you want
less.
to be closer to the street. So
Gotcha. Are there cases where that same condition would exist outside of a character district where Tony and I both paused. I'd never seen that before either. 3, but thank you for clarifying. It doesn't dramatically, it doesn't affect the project. That's right.
Is the garage heated?
We're not planning to heat it specifically.
Just explain to me the rationale why the 2 garage entrances are the interior connection between the primary and the accessory dwelling unit.
We felt that was a convenient place to provide some privacy for between the 2 units while also providing that connection so they can go through the garage to get into the main unit or the ADU. So they still have access within the building, but it still provides some privacy.
I'm just having a hard time calling that an interior door.
Because it's in a garage.
I was going to ask that too.
I was trying to figure out how you came up with that, but that's right.
It says
because it's not
per
heated.
zoning, Portsmouth zoning ordinance.
Yeah, it's part of the.
It's a state requirement, actually. That's why it's in our ordinance.
ADU interior door connection per Portsmouth zoning ordinance.
It is also a statute. I'm just, when we talked about, when this section of the ordinance was being discussed at some length, as Beth and I well recall, I think the idea, and I'm not saying you don't conform, I'm just wondering how clever this is and whether it's gone the other side of clever or stays on the good side of clever or the approvable side of clever. The idea was that, especially with the same ownership, so that it didn't end up being like a separate, like a duplex.
Right.
So that's the only part of this that I'm trying to get my head around.
Didn't we recently allow one in an unfinished basement? Wouldn't that be the same equivalent? It's an unheated
I
space.
consider a basement indoors.
But it's an unheated space, right?
Well, yeah, but that's.
I guess, in my mind, I equate them the
Okay.
same, right? Yeah.
I'm with you. Yes, Andrew?
What is the depth of the deck?
It's the height of the deck.
The depth, the width, how many people, how many chairs, how many tables are going to be sitting right there? There's a deck?
I mean, the footprint of the deck is approximately 10 feet by 10 feet by 26 or 28. Yeah. Yeah. So as you'll see, there's a perimeter, basically a hipped roof around the perimeter to provide, instead of having a full height railing, we provided a roof. It'll have a short railing on top, so that does eat into the space. So you do have about 7 feet by 20 feet, basically.
Effectively, my contemplation is by your dimensional standards and the requirements in the ordinance, you fit all of them. And so two-dimensionally, this project conforms. Three-dimensionally and more neighborhood approach would tell me, hey, probably not needed to have the third bay in the garage and probably not needed to have a deck that large. And because of the public comment, because of the fact that we are already debating Hill Street, Hanover Street, and Rock Street neighborhood here tonight, so maybe that's to your benefit or disadvantage, I'm not sure. I want to be really conscious of that. And I do think that the privacy and consciousness of what we have existing, both on Parker Street and Hanover, have to be taken into consideration. So I guess I would just like to hear the narrative or plead your case on having a deck there in the third garage bay.
Well, I mean, twofold. One, like I mentioned earlier, we did step the entire building to the west. So we moved the entire building away from the property line and the abutter and to the east. And then, again, the second floor, where the deck is, in this case, that is elevated above a number of, at least the first story windows of the abutter, if not halfway up the second story of the abutter's windows. We provided basically a solid, instead of providing an open railing, we provided a solid hipped roof that goes up approximately 3 feet, and then with a 1 foot railing on top of it. So that provides additional screening as people are sitting outside on the deck. Obviously, you're lower when you're sitting. So we did have in mind the abutters and the context of the neighborhood as we were looking at this. Does that help answer your question, or?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Paul.
The stairwell next to the ADU bedroom, it looks like there's a door from the bedroom into it, but I don't think there is. Or,
That's the basement I asked about.
so that's down from,
That's down from the grade down to the basement.
how do you get into that stairwell?
Driveway.
From
there's
the
an exterior
driveway. It's an
door?
exterior stair.
Exterior door
The exterior door at the bottom of the stair.
at the bottom, so.
Yeah.
So you have a stairwell.
Yep, so right there where Peter's cursor is, there's a stone wall that basically provides a guard around the open stairwell. And then, so at the bottom of that, which would be on the left side of that elevation down where the cursor is, that would be a door that you can't see from the street into the basement.
Okay, so that'll be under the bedroom. of the
That would be
ADU.
under the bedroom.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. We'll open the public hearing. Is anyone here or on Zoom who'd like to speak to, for, or against this application?
Hello, Laura Carty. I live at 324 Hanover Street. So as I think Mark described, this property is bordered on 3 sides by streets. I'm on the other side, so I'm the abutter that we were talking about. And I think our primary concern with this plan is really the height, which has been mentioned, and maybe it's within ordinance. But as far as our reading of the ordinance, we're seeing that the height and scale in relation to the site's surroundings should support the character of the surrounding development. And if you look at I think a couple of pictures were shown to show the context of the neighborhood, but there wasn't a picture shown of our house directly next to this house. And right now, when you stand on Hanover Street and you look at the two houses, they're the same shape and they're the same height. And with this new plan, this one's going to be, a different kind of roof and much higher. And that's our main concern, is that we think that's out of character with the existing neighborhood. And we think that there's maybe a dangerous precedent that we could be setting if we approve this. There have been several other really beautiful new homes built in the neighborhood that sort of go with the character of the neighborhood. This one, I think, would be different for a new house. And then just sort of more parochially speaking, we worry about the value of our property. The deck that I think was just being discussed is a very big deck, and it's across from our second floor bedroom windows is where that deck is located. I don't know why the deck has to be, again, there's three sides of street, and then there's, the abutting one neighbor that is there. I don't know why the deck has to be there. And then finally, we just put in solar panels last year. We're worried about the impact of this taller house now on our solar panels. And so we would ask that a shadow study would be done just to see what the impact would be on that investment that we just made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Bryn Waldwick. I live at 30 Parker Street with my wife and 2 little boys. Our main objection, very similar to what Laura said, is to the height of the building and the effect that it's going to have on the houses close to it and the future development in the neighborhood. What we're asking is that the height of the overall build be reduced so that the ridge of the mansard roof, and I say that the steep part and the shallow part, the junction between those be within a foot of the tip of John and Laura's house, which is the house right next door. I'm going to read from the criteria for approval of CUPs. I don't know if in lieu of means it's superseded if there's another section or just if it's overridden, but the height and scale in relation to the site's surroundings will complement or enhance the character of surrounding development. This is going to be about 7 feet taller than the house next door. It's going to be taller than our house, which is very structurally similar, but it's going to be many feet taller than our house. And the reason we liked the neighborhood in the first place was that it's a lot of old construction and it feels kind of quaint and cozy through that whole Hanover corridor. So the more that gets taken away, the more it sort of takes away the feel of the neighborhood that is the reason people like it. The taller new houses near older builds that are smaller create less light, less airflow, less privacy because you have windows on floors that are higher than your own looking down into your floors. Even across the street, this applies. And then less of an intimate neighborhood feel that you get from being around old construction that is of a certain scale. And then less views of the city. This is both out the windows of houses, but also just the facade of Portsmouth that you see as you walk down the sidewalk. If it ends up being drowned out, all these bigger buildings drown out the older architecture, then all you see is the big buildings and not the old ones. I actually like the look of this building, but the scale of it is going to sort of dominate the skyline of Hanover Street. Instead of seeing the Pearl, I think you'll see a lot more of this than you would if it were a little bit shorter. The other thing that we're really concerned about is encouraging the appropriate and orderly development of land and buildings in the surrounding area. We see sort of a cascading effect as you know this is being developed, as we have already been seeing discussed, and there's always precedent used by this board and the zoning board of the built environment in the area. So we worry about, as the built environment fills up with more projects that model their scale off of this one, it almost creates a malincentive for people to live in the older builds and maintain the older builds, which are sort of the thing that gives the neighborhood a quality and the place that you want to be, the place you want to walk down the sidewalk. And we just worry as time goes on that this malincentive will mean fewer and fewer people maintain the old buildings and there's only new buildings being created, and you'll sort of lose the reason why people want to be in the neighborhood in the first place. So that's why we ask that the proposal be denied unless the height is reduced to be more proportional to the surrounding houses. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Nicole Lapierre, 44 Rock Street. I just have a quick statement, but I do want to point out before I read it, in the rendering of the front of the building, I get so frustrated because this is the second builder in recent history in our neighborhood I've seen do this. There's a huge retaining wall in front of that right now, and the way, I don't know if you can bring up the picture or not, but the way they've rendered it, it looks like it's at street level, and I don't think that would be the case when it's built. So it's deceiving in what its actual height would be. Yeah, right. That's confusing to me because I know the lot well because I live right near it. There's the current, or the house they tore down, there was a retaining wall and then you went upstairs to get to it. So I'm not sure if that's accurate is what I'm saying, but at any rate, so this structure is very out of character for the neighborhood and surrounding buildings. This would set a precedent for a 3-story mansard roof on Hanover that would loom over its neighbors and cast quite a grotesque shadow. This is CD4L1 zoned, a character district. This current plan is absolutely not in keeping with the height and scale in relation to the site's surroundings. Yeah, I'd also like to point out in what they presented, the buildings they showed as relevant, they didn't give an aerial view of the houses that are around it. The woman that just spoke, I can picture her house. If you saw it, you would, when she was speaking, I thought of that juxtaposed against her beautiful, smaller old home. It's not appropriate. It's very aesthetically offensive, in fact. In addition, this proposal has nearly the same massing as the application that was denied by the ZBA in October. So as a neighbor, I respectfully request the board deny the request for a condition permit on the existing design. The building, yeah, it would be just so much taller and loom over others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again, Robin Husledge, 27 Rock Street. I am not in support of the current home, which is being proposed at 332 Hanover Street. Its height and massing are totally out of character for this area of our neighborhood. Most of the homes surrounding this are 1.5 to 2 stories tall with heights of less than 25 feet. The house's height is measured at 29 feet 3 inches, but due to the grade of the lot and the mansard roof, the result is that the house is more than 39 feet above the level of Hanover Street. It's just massive. Additionally, the heights of the individual floors, which are approximately as follows: the first floor approximately 14 feet, second floor 11 feet, third floor 9 feet, are dramatically different, proportionally speaking, to like all the other houses. For example, Bryn's house, their floors are, first floor is 9 feet, second floor is 8 feet, third floor is like 7.5 feet. So very different proportionally in size, which really does matter in terms of the look. The examples of other buildings that were provided are like apartment buildings, large condo buildings. One of the buildings is a commercial building that's over on the other side of Maplewood, in the downtown core. Like, they did not present buildings that are in that neighborhood, except for Bryn's house, which is, up the street. So they weren't really showing a real comparison to what is actually in the neighborhood. So this home being proposed will really stick out like a sore thumb and will not be in character with our neighborhood, and the design review should therefore be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other first round speakers?
Okay, if I go now? Hello, my name is Kent Bonniwell. I am the owner of the property, along with my wife, Jennifer, who is not able to be here, unfortunately, today. I did want to express just how actually very excited we are to be a part of this community and the Portsmouth community. Our in-laws live over on Spruce Creek in Kittery. We've been coming up for years and just really love the city. We make whatever excuses we can to bring our dog down and walk around the neighborhood. We appreciate the character and the styles of the homes, and we actually found this place walking around with a for sale sign on a great opportunity to take a building that was in really poor shape and overgrown and put something beautiful there, and that's important to us. We've asked, in working with Portsmouth architects here to, build us something beautiful that captures the aesthetics of the neighborhood. We were, inspired by mansard roofs like Bryn's roof, and clapboard siding like all the other buildings in the area. Doing things like double hung windows and looking at colors of that we can paint the building that's traditional to the area, and these are all things that are very important to us. When we asked to build this property, the instruction was to build something traditional, but also that met all the requirements of the ordinance. So it did not require any variances. That it was ADU that fit within the structure that we were designing and met all of those requirements as well. I will say also, just a note on the porch, we are planning on putting a privacy wall on that porch that's right there, a full privacy wall that we've been talking to our builders about. That's important to us as we build the property, but just wanted to thank you for your consideration in our proposal. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other first round speakers? We have somebody on Zoom. Go ahead on Zoom.
Well, we had a hand raised, but now it's down. Anyone on Zoom like to speak?
Is there anybody here who would like to speak? I'm going to close the first round, so Zoom, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand now. First round is closed. Any second round speakers?
Mr. Chair, just very briefly, in just response to the comments you received, there was a very common theme. It was displeasure over the height and scale of the project, and whether or not that would be out of keeping with the character of the neighborhood. This is a project that is within a character district and that meets every dimensional and aesthetic requirement within the character district. If this were not an ADU application and it was simply a single-family residence, this could be built by right, exactly as it's been presented. The fact that my client is looking to get an accessory dwelling unit, which is required to be permitted in a single-family zone under state law, is not an opportunity to spot zone this particular property so that it meets somebody's conception of what it's supposed to look like in relation to all of its neighbors. There is a very stringent character district regime that this property and this project meets every single requirement of. So I believe all you need to do is review the ADU criteria in section 814.62 and come to the determination that it meets them and it should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any second round speakers?
Hello, Bryn Waldwick, 30 Parker Street. I just wanted to add briefly, I don't even know if this is useful, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate the challenges that this lot presents, especially the way that the grade kind of slopes from Hanover up to Tanner. I mean, I live across the street. It's just the way that my mind works. I've been staring at this house for 4 years, looking at the lot and wondering how you could build a house there, because it's fun to think about how you would fit the floors together. I think a lot of the reason the height came into the building is because they'd like to have garages come from Tanner, but then the facade of the building is on Hanover. So if you look at the elevations, the second floor of this building starts 17 feet above Hanover Street. So that's pretty much where the differential between what many of the neighbors see as what would fit and what is able to be built under the constraints that are seen here. And I think a lot of it is trying to fit a garage under the second floor when the first floor starts on Hanover Street. So I was just wondering about the idea of deleting the ADU garage and making the garages go up a small set of stairs to the second floor, so the second floor could kind of be lowered and still have the full ceiling height that you want in the higher floors. I'm not saying this to tell the applicants how I think they should build their house. It's more just to make the point to the board and to the design team that it just feels like there's trade-offs that could be made to make everything fit together a little more nicely, and we were just hoping that some of those trade-offs could be made to make the top of the building closer to the top of the other buildings. That's all. Thank you also just for your consideration and all of these different issues. I know it's not an easy job. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other second round speakers? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. Hearing is closed. Board discussion?
As the attorney pointed out, if there wasn't an ADU, we wouldn't be talking about this tonight. And I'm not crazy about the solar panels next door being impacted by additional height, but again, if there was not a conditional use for the ADU, this building as presented would be built.
The massing, right. I'm still troubled by the interior door issue, but
That's the least of.
Mr. Chair, would you like a motion?
yes.
I would vote that the planning board find that the conditional use permit application meets the requirements set forth in section 10.814.62 of the ordinance and adopt the findings of fact as presented.
Second.
Discussion. You can say you moved. Any discussion? Yes, Paul.
Can we confirm that the discussion we're going to have later tonight about doing some rezoning in this general area has nothing to do with this? This will not be changed?
Correct.
Correct.
We have all the information. So I think I support this motion.
So it's finding of fact again. We're all good with that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Mr. Chair, I move that we vote to grant the conditional use permit with the following conditions, 2.1 through 2.3 in the staff memo.
Second.
Discussion.
Discussion.
Yes.
As it has been stated, the only reason this is before us is to approve the ADU. It meets every single one of the ADU criteria. It's the exact same square footage. As much as the chairman doesn't like the interior door, I'm okay with it because we allow one in a basement, and I feel like a basement's very similar to a garage. It's not heated, it's unconditioned space, but I consider my garage part of my house, so along with the basement. I understand the concerns. It's not in our purview to actually change the way the massing, the height. It does fit within the CD4L1 zoning as far as height and whatnot. I think it's been very creative in the way they have, the ADU is basically 5 feet off, so I'm thinking there's shorter ceilings must be in the bedroom, because by the time they get above the ADU, it's all on one level. So the creativeness to bring actually the front door down close to the street, and to be able to still fit in a basement and everything, it's a lot on one lot, but it fits within the zoning. So I will support it because it does meet all the criteria, and that is what we are supposed to be looking at, is the ADU, not the remainder of the house.
I guess I would say that it is in our purview because there is some subjectivity to a conditional use permit that allows us to consider the neighborhood and particularly neighborhood values or character. And being in a character district, I would push towards that or fall towards that in the sense of we need to align on what these particular character neighborhoods already have existing. And if you have the potential of adverse value on a neighboring property, then to me that's something worth looking at and considering. I 100% understand the argument that we wouldn't be looking at it otherwise. And I also understand that we have tried to streamline ADUs in this city. It's really not about the ADU in my head. It's more so about that height and consideration of utilizing elevations, not so much to manipulate and make a larger building, but be conscious and sensitive towards neighboring buildings. That's why I think it would follow or fall into our judgment.
I think interestingly, if it were being proposed to be attached to the existing building, a lot more massing issues would come into play, given the other section, because it'd be just considered differently. I think it's a clever design, as I said to the applicant. I'm still troubled by that interior door, but maybe you've convinced me.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Joe?
I just wanted to be clear, I don't want to apologize for my support on the project. I'm not supporting it just because it meets the requirements. I happen to think it's a very well-designed, beautiful building that does fit within the neighborhood. I think it's a quality design. I appreciate the level of design that's gone into it and the detail. So that's why I'm supporting it, in addition to meeting all the requirements. I don't want to be apologetic for my support, or I'm confident with my support.
No apology noted.
Yeah.
No apologies.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You passed. Thank you. I was just going to say, I think we could use a break.
Thank God I got
Say
my
7 minutes, because it will never be 5 minutes. Call the meeting back to order. I believe the next items are zoning amendment discussion.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Everybody's fresh and ready for in-depth chat. Would you like to lead us through them, Peter?
Sure. All right, so after the March 27th work session, we're going to prepare maps showing what was proposed in January of 2020 for this area, and then the board also wanted to see what it would look like if certain parcels went to CD4W. So we provided maps showing the January 2020 recommendation with the addition of 66 Rock Street. And this proposal was that 66 Rock Street, in this proposal, it includes 66 Rock Street going from CD5 to CD4. The front half of 361 Hanover going from CD5 to CD401, and then the back half going from CD5 to CD4. And then 89 Foundry and 126 Bridge Street will go from CD5 to CD4. The second map shows what those properties would look like going to CD4W. And what would remain the same would be the front half of 361 Hanover going to CD4L1. Also provided a map showing basically where CD4W is in the city. It's really only the west end. So this is what it would look like if you recommended those changes and how it would relate to the to the CD4W district. So we can stop and talk about zoning, or I can go through all of them. We have building height, north end overlay, and downtown overlay after the zoning change. I can go through it all, or we can stop here. It's up to.
And you have a recommendation, right?
Right. Staff would recommend the original recommendation from January 2020. If it goes to CD4W, it's going to make the 89 Foundry, which is almost complete, non-conforming. It would likely make 361 Hanover non-conforming, and it's kind of odd to make this CD4W as it relates to where CD4W is zoned in the rest of the city. But that's up for discussion amongst the board.
Wasn't the biggest concern of the neighbors the eating and drinking establishments? Or that was one of their...
Right, the uses.
Intensity of use.
Intensity of uses, which...
Right.
Eating and drinking. Currently, it's permitted up to 500. CD401, it's not permitted, and then CD4W, it's permitted up to 50 occupancy, and then up to 250 with a special exception.
Do we have a 500-seat eating and drinking facility in the city?
We do not.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we do.
Call that a convention center, right?
Yeah.
We almost did one. Long time ago.
Can we kind of run through the pros and cons of the CDW where, if we change a zoning and have two parcels that are immediately non-conforming, part of me is like, well, all right, then someday in the future we'll get it to more of what we want in that neighborhood. But the other part of me is like, well, probably stifle development because no owner is going to, want to renovate that property to trigger a zoning change that's restrictive of what they already have, built. And then we're probably on that same vein, probably going to see a lot of ZBA decisions in support of, against the variance, because it's like they're already there now and all these things. So in the world of zoning science, he's laughing.
There's a world of zoning science.
When I'm weighing these two kind of thought processes, is there something else that you would add as an expert in zoning? Like what are we not considering? What didn't I not mention that goes into the thought process of the staff recommending?
Well, I think, you have one building that's 89 Foundry that's under construction and was approved with an incentive to get extra height through the current zoning. And then you'll immediately make it non-conforming for building footprint, height. Well, we'll talk about height in a minute, but.
Yeah, I get all that.
Yeah.
But let's assume these two properties are built because they're both grandfathered in the old, one's almost done and one's grandfathered in the old zoning. So they're built,
Well, I'll tell you, the way the current zoning came into place is through the master planning process for the north end. One option is we're getting ready to start the master plan process again. And, one option would be to let's take a hard look at this area through that process.
But these don't follow, that building does not follow what the zoning was. It was granted relief, right? The 89 Foundry.
They got an incentive, conditional use permit.
I thought there was some relief granted to make that roof. Am I thinking of a different?
That's the incentive.
That's for in the north end. They got a conditional use permit and they provided community space and got a taller building.
Therefore, it did meet zoning, there was a path.
There's a path through
There was an
but not
actual
through
defined path for them to get that.
It is unusual to downzone recent construction. That could have a dampening effect on people looking at properties. It's a fallacy to think that if vacant land or undeveloped land, if you change the zone, you downzone it. It's not a diminishment of. There's no argument. But go ahead, Beth.
I guess my argument if the recommendation is CD4 and we've been asked to do CD4W, CD4 is going to be non-compliant. It's going to be non-conforming there too. So because it's very similar in everything except for building coverage is really the only place that has a major difference. So if it's built out to CD5 at this point, it's going to be non-conforming at CD4, and it's not going to be that much more non-conforming to be CD4W if we're just strictly looking at dimensional standards. Right?
Well, their footprint, I think their footprint is 16,000.
Right, and it's 15,000 in
Right.
CD4, so it'll be non-conforming, even with the change you recommended. So really, the bigger change is its use, and honestly, that building is mostly retail and residential, so it's not probably going to be non-conforming in that respect. So it's already going to be non-conforming at CD4. So I guess I don't see the huge jump in going to W.
Right. Well, it'll also be non-conforming for lot area per dwelling, building coverage. I haven't looked at the other.
Lot
ones,
area
but
per dwelling is
yeah.
the only place where there's a difference.
Building coverage. Going
Right.
from 90 to 60.
So Peter did mention the idea is we don't do it. We don't make a recommendation, wait for the master plan recommendation. Yes.
That would be my consideration because, as we just mentioned, both of the projects that would be most impacted here are already vested, if not built. The others don't have any current proposals, and I don't want to just put the cart before the horse. And I understand the qualm from 2020 until now, and certainly tonight's decision with the design and investing that changes it, but it just doesn't necessarily make logical sense to change it now, go through a master plan process and say, oh, well, maybe there was something that we could have looked at more in depth. Is the only parcel that is yet to be developed in that consideration the plumbing building?
Right, so on this map, yes, the plumbing building, and then 66 Rock Street. Mr. Hapney was here tonight speaking. I think he has a,
Which is the,
it's on the other side of the circle.
yeah.
The metal shop.
Metal shop.
Here,
I
you're down in the west end.
Tony?
Given
get
the-
how people are creative.
Let's try to keep
Sorry.
one conversation going if we can. before we-
I mean, I think two things. One is, given the pressure on housing in the city, I think there's a high degree of likelihood that redevelopment will occur in this area, on some of these older apartment buildings. And secondly, I agree with the sense that there's a lot of sense to wait for this master planning process, but, I do feel for the residents who have been told, we're going to get to it, we're going to get to it, and that we're going to be coming to one more time saying we're going to get to it. So it's just, I would have a lot of empathy for their frustration over that.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I have trouble voting for or taking an action that would immediately make these parcels non-conforming, and I think we've heard from lots of people that our zoning is overly complex, and if we can make it much more simplified through this master planning process, and we can come up with zoning that would work with the neighbors and incorporate what they'd like to see, that would be my goal.
Of course, the zoning component will be stage 2. I'd love to get there. That would be, we need to do
I
that.
think
Yes.
the planning board would
What
be
would the
good.
timeline for that be?
Which?
Master plan and then knowing enough out of the master plan process to be able to do rezoning?
Well, the master plan contract has been signed?
Yep, I think they're going to get ready, going in earnest in May, and I think it's about a 12 to 14-month process from there.
Yep.
And if we could move zoning recommendations shortly thereafter, that would be the goal.
'Cause you will have development along Hill Street, but the duplexes there will be not there 5 years from now. I don't know if they'll be there 2 years from now, and it would be nice to be able to kind of control what they look like.
The note that I haven't gotten to, because we haven't gotten to that on the agenda, was to talk about, and I've talked about this with staff, is having a workshop discussion with staff and the consultant on the master plan possibly next month to talk about getting things started, how we work together to do that. So that's that. And Tony, to your point, I hear you. I've heard the residents. I feel for them. It's unfortunate the ball was dropped, but it wasn't us, and now is now, and we are looking at a new master plan. So I'm looking at both. I'm inclined to stay where we are and wait for more information. That's where my head is at.
Again,
Go ahead.
the property that stands to be most impacted is Peter Hapney's property. By GIS measurement, which can be imperfect, it is 60 feet wide at the max. After setbacks, you are hard pressed to get a viable building there. And then considering circulation parking and overall massing on that site, it's a very long, oblong shaped site. So that alone tells me it's not impending, it's not imminent, and someone would be going through quite a bit of engineering to figure out and design a feasible building there. So regardless of that, these other 3 multifamily buildings, I don't think are something that we need to put to the forefront of this consideration, particularly if we have 3 active construction projects going on in this certain location. And I don't know if I'm not understanding something entirely, so if I'm not, I apologize, but.
I understand you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I would be against putting this off at this time, just because we have put it off for so long. And like Tony, I do feel for the neighborhood, and I don't see any reason why, even if we change things, we couldn't still look at it through the master plan and decide whether or not what we did was correct, or whether or not it does need further changing.
Why do it twice?
Because I'm trying to respond to the tons of people that we have heard from regarding this for months and months now, not to mention years before that. So,
Yeah, I totally get it. That's just,
Isn't this impacting the plumbing store?
that's what I
Yes.
mean.
Yes.
And that's, yeah. But to me, that's just beyond the Hill Rock Street neighborhood, and I may be incorrect, but
it's on Hill Street.
I understand. The consideration of traffic through Hanover Street, I think, is my primary thought, given the different heights and densities of the two zones we're contemplating, and then the plumbing building faces a complete opposite direction.
And CD5 is locked in down at the corner.
What?
CD5 is locked in down to Rock Street on Hanover. Design review.
But from this diagram, it doesn't change the allowed building height of the plumbing building.
That's another option, is to make the recommendation to change it except for that parcel. I mean, why doesn't somebody make a motion so we can move this along?
I could also go through
This is
the
a-
other
Oh,
sections.
that's right, we're not doing public hearing.
Or you, unless you want to take each one.
This is a public hearing,
No, but you can take public comment.
public meeting,
Right.
public comment. We went past 10 o'clock. Is everybody okay with continuing with this? Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Motion to go past 10 o'clock.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And so you can go home. How you doing, Joe?
I'm okay. Are we trying to take on it with this version more than we need to?
I'm sorry, what was that?
So is there something in between putting it off for a year and a half and doing it now? Are there some of these parcels that have some real world, something pending that we know would be pending within a year or two that need to be dealt with? And then let the big picture wait for a year and a half?
That plumbing site parcel is pretty big, you know?
Yeah.
Seems like low-hanging fruit to me, I don't know.
Well, Bill asked a good question, and I also don't want to find us, I've heard multiple people tonight talking about the need to respond to the neighborhood, but I don't want us to do something that is just simply giving a token to the neighborhood saying, see, look, we made a little change here, but if it's not impactful, or if it creates more problems for us in the long term, you know, we're considering decades here. We're not considering just making a neighborhood happy right now because of something that happened. It's two completely different responsibilities. So yeah, when we get into these, Andrew brought up some excellent points. If we start to do something that turns someone's lot into a nightmare to develop, then, you know, we need to know that. And are we dramatically affecting the use, the potential development of what we're referring to as a plumbing building? We need to be confident that we're doing the right thing. And I'm sorry to say, I don't know if we are right now. And I know that we feel like we've been kicking this down the road, but guess what? We may have to kick it a little further.
Well, related to this is maybe, and the master plan will do this, is thinking about more than just what's on these maps.
Yeah.
And these neighborhoods that are nearby, maybe they need a completely different set of zoning that fits those neighborhoods.
I'd like to make a motion that, for this portion, that we leave this until the master plan process plays out.
I'll second.
Any discussion on that?
We're going to just keep talking about this. We don't have, I think Joe's statement is like, I don't have confidence on this, that this is the right zoning for it. So that's what flipped the switch for me. So let's get that going, spend our efforts and get that forward rather than waste time on arguing on potential zoning, interim zoning changes.
So is this noticed as public input tonight?
It's not noticed, but you can take public comment.
We've had a lot of public
You're just
comment.
reporting. I mean, this is a report back to council.
We've had a lot of public comment on this one. I
That was,
think I'm going to call a vote on this one.
I do have one thing.
Yes.
If we put it off to the master plan process, is there a possibility that incentivizing someone trying to squeeze something in before that actually happens? Like,
Yes.
Absolutely.
So,
And they have the right to.
And it incentivizes them to start the process.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they can rush before it. Listen, we're not the final say here, too.
Right.
The council can
The
take
council
action.
can just do it.
We're just going to report to the council what we think. The council can respond. The public has another chance to come to the council and say, we want this, and if they want to do it, that's fine.
So one of the theme of what the public has complained about is mass and the step, how you transition from a 5 down to something that's more consistent with what's currently there. If Peter reviewed this proposal with the goal of identifying just any changes that met that criteria, then we could discuss a subset of this and not put it all off forever. And we would still, I think that's what most of us would want to do anyway for design. I think that will be what will come out of a master plan, is the transition, the handling of the transition from more dense to less dense.
I hear what you're saying. I think that massing is not what's been proposed on these maps. The changes
Correct.
we're talking about is what I just mentioned, of going further into the neighborhoods.
Yes.
I think those are the areas that maybe need to change, and not necessarily these
Correct.
more commercial mixed-use areas.
Absolutely.
So we could still do that, for sure.
But we can be responsive because we're sympathetic with it, because it's the right thing, not just because people complain. But we could do that and not be at risk of being things happening before the master plan's done. The master plan's a long way away, really.
And you don't have to wait. It could be prioritized, neighborhoods can be prioritized, so it doesn't necessarily have to wait a year and a half, but, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important note. We still get the opportunity to come back to this prior to the master plan even being completed. Maybe we just have an outside set of eyes, look at this, consider it, validate it, refute it, things of that nature, and then in a handful of months we're back at this and maybe with a refreshed perspective. I mean, it's a valid thought, and it's just the minutia of it, I feel as though needs to be ironed out to understand the total implication with a great deal of respect and understanding for the neighborhood. I would be hesitant to change this again and again.
You know, something else that came up tonight, that the idea of tear downs and doing new construction is something that, with the ADU concept, we talked about it, but I don't think we considered it quite to the degree. And it's a good design. That one we looked at earlier tonight, that is a good design. But is the massing right for the neighborhood? I don't know the answer to that question. So that's something we could look at too. But that criteria is not in our ordinance. That's my point. There was no way for us to look at that. So.
Last comment, my last comment on this, I promise. I think I'm well intentioned in that I'm looking at the public and being empathetic about that, but I think the city council looks to us to be a board of applying zoning science as much as possible, and it's their responsibility to be the political board.
Right.
And so I have no problem if they take this and they say, we want to do this for the neighborhood, that's fine, but I don't want to imply that this rush to a zoning change is something that we've
In keeping with Absolutely.
thoroughly vetted and you know, and all that stuff. I want to do it because I want to be responsive to the neighborhood, and that's not a planning science thought process.
Oh, this is a good discussion. You know, it's evolved as we've talked about it, and I think that's a healthy conversation.
Salient point, Tony.
Any other discussion? We have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed.
So we know
City
what the
council
we know what the recommendation will be to council.
I will bring forward all of your comments.
And what
And the
did I just
nuance.
step on?
No. I was just going to confirm that it was all of the stuff that was in the memo, but I'm assuming that it was. All the other changes that we were talking about, building height and downtown overlay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's everything.
Well, if you don't change the zoning, there's no point in changing the building height. What about the overlay district? Do you want to wait on that too?
Did you want to look at the overlay downtown? No, okay.
There you go.
That is what you meant.
Check.
Yes.
That's what I,
Okay.
that's what I thought.
He is,
I can repeat my speech I just gave. I thought it was pretty good.
It was quite
he was excellent.
Recorded.
So I mentioned the idea of a workshop with the master plan consultant. Related to that, we have to figure out how the planning board is going to work with the consultant and staff on the master plan process. Big question. We're not going to settle it tonight. I don't even want people to try to settle it tonight. But if some of you are willing to do more than just being a planning board member, as in a subcommittee on the master plan to work more with the consultant, email Peter and me saying you're interested, and we'll pick some, we'll consider that, and then we'll have that discussion when we have our workshop discussion. I have the sense, and I may be wrong in this, that there may be a smaller group of the board that maybe wants to work more on the master plan, which could involve public meetings, outreach, things that we don't normally do, but are important to make the master plan process better. Not a requirement. That's why I'm asking if people want to volunteer. So think about it. And unless anybody has something else.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
You don't even have to motion. We're adjourned.